Today we are covering what happened to all the top 10 picks from the year 2000 up until 2004. Now these are videos that I previously made. I compiled them all into this video for you guys. So drop a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel for more content, and let's get into it. You're not going to want to miss this. This is what happened to the top 10 picks of the 2000 NBA draft. Coming into the 2000 NBA draft, Kenyon Martin was coming off of an incredible senior season at the University of Cincinnati, where he would be named as the 1999-2000 Player of the Year, averaging 18.9 points, 9.7 rebounds, 1.4 assists, 1.4 steals, and 3.5 blocks per game. It was very difficult for scouts not to be in love with his game, with NBADraft.net giving him a prospect score of 106 out of 120. Scouting teams around the league were head over heels for his athletic ability, play above the rim, shot blocking ability, his ability to control the boards on both sides of the ball, and his clutch gene. However, there were definitely some doubts if he would be able to dominate the paint the same way that he could in college due to his 6'9" height at the power forward position and the lack of upper body strength that he had at the time. While this is more than an ideal size for a power forward in today's game, back in 2000, it was still not out of the ordinary for teams to build twin tower type lineups. Along with this, some speculated that this would culminate in him suffering through constant injuries once he was actually in the NBA. Many compared his game to Rasheed Wallace, and as expected, the New Jersey Nets used the first overall pick to add Martin to their roster. When asked about his draft night experience years after his retirement, Martin was quoted as saying, "People ask me about my career and my highs and lows. The happiest moment of my career was just getting drafted. Just getting drafted, period. My draft picture. That's the only picture I got hanging up in my house right now. It meant so much, and I'm crying shaking David Stern's hand." Martin would have a very successful rookie season, proving that he was more than capable of holding his own in the paint at the professional level, leading the Nets in blocks per game with 1.7. He was named to the All-Rookie First Team. However, without much elite talent on the team, New Jersey would struggle their way to a 26-56 record. In the offseason, they would make a crucial addition to the team in Jason Kidd, one of the best playmakers that the game had ever seen. The Nets would have an incredible turnaround season, more than doubling their 26 wins from the previous year and ending their 2000-2001 campaign with a record of 52-30. Despite only being in his second season, Martin would lead the team in points and blocks per game with 14.9 and 1.7 respectively. New Jersey would go on a deep playoff run this year, beating the Indiana Pacers in the first round in 5 games, the Charlotte Hornets in the second round in 5 games, the Boston Celtics in the Eastern Conference Finals in 6 games, but then they would have the misfortune of running into the Shaq and Kobe-led Los Angeles Lakers in the NBA Finals. While Martin had proven that he would function well in the paint at the NBA level, trying to score on and slow down a force like Shaquille O'Neal is an entirely different beast. The Nets would fall in just 4 games. However, this would still be one of the most impressive single-season turnarounds in recent history. After the masterclass that Shaq put on in those NBA Finals, New Jersey would pick up Dikembe Mutombo in the following offseason to help aid Martin against much larger opponents in the paint. While Mutombo would go on to lead the team in blocks this season, Martin would dominate the boards, leading the team with 8.3 per game. Once again, the Nets were poised for a deep playoff run, and they took care of business beating the Milwaukee Bucks in 6 games in the first round. They then proceeded to sweep the Boston Celtics and Detroit Pistons to get to their second consecutive NBA Finals. This time, they would take on the San Antonio Spurs. While New Jersey fared better in this series, they still would fall short of a title, losing the series in 6 games. Over the offseason, minor adjustments will be made to the roster, the biggest being replacing Mutombo with Alonzo Mourning, another legendary center with a traditional skill set for the position. This would go on to be the best individual season of Martin's career, with him making his first and only All-Star appearance. He once again led the Nets in rebounds and blocks per game with 9.5 and 1.3 respectively. While the Nets were able to make the previous 2 NBA Finals, they were stopped short in the second round by the eventual champion Detroit Pistons in 7 games. After a disappointing postseason for New Jersey, they felt as if a trade was necessary and dealt Martin to the Denver Nuggets. In a sign-in trade, New Jersey would acquire 3 first-round picks, and Martin would go on to join a very solid Denver Nuggets team built around a budding star in Carmelo Anthony. While Martin did not lead Denver in any statistical category in his first year with the team, he would play an incredible second fiddle to Anthony. However, with the Western Conference being absolutely loaded around this time, they would fall in the first round to the San Antonio Spurs, just 5 games. In the 2005 to 2006 season, Martin would miss a substantial chunk of the season due to an injury, only playing 56 games. And the Nuggets once again fell in the first round in 5 games, this time to the Los Angeles Clippers. Martin would only be able to participate in 2 games in the following season due to injuries. However, when he made his return in the 2007 to 2008 season, he would regain his position as a full-time starter. He would continue being the starting power forward for his remaining time in Denver. However, the team would not be able to achieve much in the postseason, and injuries would increasingly begin to take their toll on Martin. After the 2010 to 11 season, Denver would go into rebuilding mode, and Martin would walk to free agency, where he signed with the Los Angeles Clippers. This would be the first time in his career that he strictly came off the bench, serving as a backup and mentor to Blake Griffin. Despite the handful of injuries that he suffered at this point in his career, he was still a very effective rebounder and rim protector, but the Clippers would still fall in the second round of the playoffs. After his 1-year run with the Clippers, he would reunite with Carmelo Anthony, this time on the New York Knicks, where he spent the next 2 seasons. He would then fluctuate between starter and bench player on the Knicks in the limited time that he was able to take the court. Over those 2 seasons with the Knicks, he would only play in 50 games. His final year in the league would come in the 2014 to 15 season, where he would only play in 11 games with the Milwaukee Bucks. And after his NBA career had ended, Martin joined Ice Cube's Big 3 basketball league, and he helped lead the trilogy to an undefeated season in 2017, and later became the team's head coach. Now he gets to kick back, relax, and watch his son, Kenyon Martin Jr., play for the Philadelphia 76ers. Despite being the second overall pick in the 2000 draft, most NBA fans have forgotten about our next player completely. Despite struggling at the professional level, Stromile Swift was a highly touted prospect coming into the 2000 NBA draft. In his final year at LSU, he was named as the SEC Player of the Year. Scouts were in love with his jumping ability, and he turned heads when he jumped from the free throw line as a high schooler. However, he was looked at as a raw talent type of guy that would have to be carefully developed if he were to become a top talent in the league. NBADraft.net gave him a prospect score of 99 out of 120, and many scouts compared him to Shawn Kemp. The Vancouver Grizzlies would use their second overall pick to add him to their already well-rounded roster that included Sharif Abdur-Rahim and Mike Bibby. But concerning signs would begin to show themselves in his rookie season, as he was only able to start in 6 out of 80 games that he played in. Despite almost all of his shots coming inside the three-point line, Swift still shot a less than ideal 45.1% from the field and averaged 4.9 points per game. Despite his struggles in regulation games, he was still turning heads as a dunker, and he would actually go on to compete in the 2001 Slam Dunk Contest. The 2001 to 2002 season would be the best of his career. However, he would still struggle to break into the starting lineup, only serving as a starter in 20.5% of the games that he played in. Despite this, he would still rank 5th on the Grizzlies in points and 2nd in blocks with 11.8 and 1.7 per game respectively. While Swift would not show much growth into his final 2 years with the Grizzlies, the team would begin to develop into playoff contenders, making postseason appearances in both the 2003 to 2004 and 2004 to 2005 seasons. But they would be swept in the first round both times by the San Antonio Spurs in 2004 and by the Phoenix Suns in 2005. The 2004 to 2005 season would be the final time in Swift's career that he was able to average double-digit points per game. In the offseason following the 2004 to 2005 season, Swift would sign with the Houston Rockets, where he would play a very similar role. After just 1 season with Houston, they would trade him and Rudy Gay back to the Grizzlies for Shane Battier. In the 2006 to 2007 season, Swift would once again struggle to gain the attention of the coaching staff, and it was very clear that he didn't have what it took to become an elite NBA talent like many had hoped. Midway through the following season, Memphis would trade him to the New Jersey Nets for Jason Collins and cash considerations. After a short-lived stint with the Nets, where he would only play in 27 games, he would be waived from the team. Despite this, he would quickly be signed by the Phoenix Suns. However, after only averaging 3.0 points and 2.5 rebounds in the 2008 to 2009 season, he would be forced to begin his career overseas with the Shandong Lions. Nowadays, Swift coaches high school basketball at Word of God Academy in Louisiana and led them to 2 ACEL state championships in a row. Although the next player on our list would prove himself as a skilled inside scorer, his career would be cut unexpectedly short due to injuries. Darius Miles entered the NBA straight from high school and showed loads of potential through his short time in the league. Coming into the draft, NBADraft.net gave him a prospect score of 98 out of 120. Scouts were very high on his athletic ability, how he ran the floor, and his handle. However, with him coming from high school, there were obvious concerns on if his body would be able to keep up with grown men. Along with this, he did not have much of an outside shot coming into the league, but he was still drawing comparisons to Hall of Fame caliber players such as Tracy McGrady. The Los Angeles Clippers would select him with the 3rd overall pick, buying into this tremendous upside that he presented. An interesting pick as they already featured solid wing options like Corey Maggette, Lamar Odom, and Quentin Richardson. Due to those players already being at the wing, Miles would only start in a combined 27 out of 163 games that he played in Los Angeles. Over that time, he proved himself as a very solid inside scorer, rebounder, and interior defender, and even made the all-rookie first team. However, he lacked any sort of outside shot. In an attempt to trade their wing depth for some help at the point guard position, Miles and Harold Jamison would be traded to the Cleveland Cavaliers for Andre Miller and Bryant Stith. Beginning in the 2002 to 2003 season with the Cavaliers, Miles would play almost every game as the team's starting small forward. Despite being given a bigger role, Miles would still struggle to find his shot, finishing the season shooting 41% from the field and missing every three-point attempt that he took. In the following offseason, Cleveland would draft LeBron James, causing Miles once again to struggle to find a role that he fit well into. As a result of this, Cleveland would trade him to the Portland Trail Blazers for Jeff McInnes and Ruben Boomshay. Miles would start in 40 out of 42 games that he played in for the Trailblazers in the 2003 to 2004 season and was playing some of the best basketball of his career up to that point. Despite continuing this hot streak into the 2004 to 2005 season, he would make headlines for an altercation with the team's head coach, Maurice Cheeks, in a film session. Things got so bad that Miles was suspended for 2 games for conduct that was detrimental to the team, and Cheeks considered quitting afterwards. Miles would go on to release a statement saying, "Things were said in frustration and I'm sorry for that. It is very important to me that our fans understand that I am committed to winning, and that losses we have had this season have been difficult for all of us. My entire focus when I return to the team will be on winning and helping us make a run for the playoffs." Despite this incident, the Trailblazers would keep Miles on their roster for the remainder of the season and through the 2005 to 2006 season as well. The 2005 to 2006 season would be statistically the best of his entire career, averaging 14.0 points per game, second on the team only behind Zach Randolph. However, tragedy would strike and Miles would suffer a knee injury that would severely limit his production in the 2005 to 2006 campaign, along with keeping him sidelined for the next 2 seasons as well. Sadly, Miles would never be the same player after this injury and would only play 1 more season in the league. He joined the Memphis Grizzlies, but he was forced to serve a 10-game suspension for violating the league's substance abuse policy. He played strictly a bench role for the Grizzlies, and it was clear that he was no longer an NBA caliber player. His game heavily relied on his athleticism, and with a knee injury so serious, there was not much he could really contribute at the time. After averaging 3.5 points per game with Memphis, he was forced into retirement at only 27 years old. In a Reddit Ask Me Anything he hosted, when asked what he thought of the duo of him and Zach Randolph, what they could have been, Miles was quoted as saying, "I definitely think me and Zebo could have been a dominant duo. I was ready to take the next step of my career in Portland. I felt like my skill level and knowledge of the game was right there to be a number 1 or 2 option on a team. I had 7 coaches in 9 years, so it was hard to get rhythm, but I don't dwell on what ifs. Just take the cards that's dealt to me." The 42-year-old Miles is now worth about $100,000 according to Celebrity Net Worth. His $61 million salary from the NBA was nearly all gone at the age of 34, and he filed for bankruptcy in 2016. Nowadays, he hosts a podcast with former teammate Quentin Richardson called The Knuckleheads, where they interview top players in the league. The 4th overall pick in this draft class would also tragically have their career cut short due to injuries. Heading into the 2000 NBA draft, Marcus Fizer was coming off a big junior season at Iowa State, where he was named as the Big 12 Player of the Year. Scouts saw him as having an NBA-ready body, an inside-out scorer, and had quite the handle for a power forward in this era. But he was a bit slow for his size, and some were worried that he would be too short to play power forward at the NBA level. Despite this, he still drew comparisons to players like Charles Barkley. The Chicago Bulls snatched him up with the 4th overall pick, but this would likely end up being a pick that they wish they could have had back. In his rookie season, while averaging a solid enough stat line of 9.5 points and 4.3 rebounds per game, he would struggle to score efficiently, shooting 43% from the field. However, he would still earn a spot on the all-rookie team and worked his way into the starting lineup in 13 out of 72 games that he played in. Looking to make a big jump in his second season, Fiserv had the best statistical season of his short career. He ranked 5th on the team in points per game and 3rd in rebounds per game, with 12.3 and 5.6 respectively. While he was still struggling to score at an efficient clip, it still appeared that Fiserv was taking steps in the right direction. He was playing at a very similar level early on in the 2002 to 2003 season, but after a devastating ACL tear that took place at the end of January, he would never be the same player again. He finished out his contract with Chicago in the 2003 to 2004 season, only managing to start in 2 out of 46 games that he played in. It was clear that there was still some work to do for him to ever get back to the previous level that he was playing at. After the season, he would sign a 1-year deal with the Milwaukee Bucks after failing to make the final roster of the newly added Charlotte Hornets after being drafted by the team in the expansion draft. Fiserv would strictly play a bench role with the Bucks and would have one of the most efficient scoring seasons of his career. But with him still falling very short of the promise that he had coming into the league, the Bucks front office believed the roster spot would better be served with a different player. As a result of this, Fiserv would once again hit the free agency market without many suitors. He was forced to spend most of the season in the D-League, but after winning the league's MVP, he would earn a 10-day contract with the New Orleans Hornets. Over those 10 days, he would play in 3 games, and although he shot 52.9% from the field, 100% from 3, and averaged more points per game than he did with the Bucks, this would be his final stint in the NBA. When talking about his time in the league in a 2013 interview, he was quoted as saying, "My thing is, my career was derailed by injuries. It's probably my fault, because I wasn't training the way I should have. But I've had 3 ACL surgeries. To be playing right now is definitely a blessing. When you're playing at any high level after that, it's just a blessing. But you see guys who are former lottery picks who have played most of their careers and then turned out not to have done anything. I think it's unfair because of the injuries I've had to deal with. Like I said, I'll take the blame because I didn't train the way I should have, but now I get it." After basketball, Fiserv dabbled in being a youth pastor for some time before ultimately becoming the CEO of Slip Guardians, which is a company that treats floors to be slip resistant. While this next player was not one of the 3 in the draft class to make an all-star game, it could still be argued that he had one of the best careers out of any player in the 2000 NBA draft class. Mike Miller entered the 2000 NBA draft coming off of an all-SEC season in his final year with the Florida Gators. He was looked at as a player who could do it all. Scouts made sure to point out his elite ball handling skills, especially for a player that is 6'8". As we know, the strongest part of his game is his lights-out shooting from beyond the arc though. Outside of him being a bit lacking as an athlete, scouts really didn't have to say much about his weaknesses in his game. The Orlando Magic picked him up with the 5th overall pick, and Miller would prove that he was ready to make the adjustment to the NBA early in his rookie season. He started in all but 20 games and proved scouts right about his outside shot, converting 40.7% of his 3-point attempts. He would take home the Rookie of the Year award and play a major role in the Orlando Magic making a trip to the playoffs, where they would sadly be eliminated by the Milwaukee Bucks in 4 games. While Miller would still not take over as a full-time starter despite being the reigning Rookie of the Year, this was not a result of him playing poorly. Magic had a plethora of wing talent at the time, including Tracy McGrady and Grant Hill. Miller would finish his second season in the league as the 3rd highest scorer on the team with 15.2 points per game, finishing only behind the 2 previously mentioned players. Once again, Orlando would be bounced in the first round of the playoffs, this time by the Charlotte Hornets. Midway through the 2002 to 2003 season, Miller, Ryan Humphrey, a 2003 first-round pick, and a 2004 second-round pick would be sent to the Memphis Grizzlies for Gordon Giricek, Drew Gooden, and cash considerations. He would play a reduced role with Memphis, leading to his per-game stats to take a bit of a hit. However, he was still scoring at a ridiculously efficient clip. In the 16 games that he played for Memphis, he shot 51% from the field and 50% from 3. However, he and the Grizzlies would miss the playoffs. Following season, Miller would serve as a full-time starter for the first time in his career. He served as an elite spot-up shooter, one of the league's best marksmen. In the postseason, Miller would once again suffer a first-round defeat, being swept by the San Antonio Spurs. In the 2004 to 2005 season, Miller would bounce from starter to bench player throughout the year, excelling in both of those roles. It would be his best scoring season since the year he was traded to the Grizzlies. Although Memphis made a return to the playoffs, the roster didn't have what it took to keep up with some of the top teams in the league, and they would be swept in the first round, this time by the Phoenix Suns. The following year, Miller would thrive coming off the bench. Despite only starting in 9 games throughout the season, Miller would still see improvements to his scoring and rebounding numbers. This earned him the honor of being the league's 6th man of the year. But in the playoffs, he would once again be sent home in embarrassing fashion, being swept in the first round, this time by the Dallas Mavericks. It seems like everybody is just taking their turns, sweeping Mike Miller in the playoffs. You gotta feel bad for the guy. This would be the final time that he was a part of a playoff team until the 2010-11 season. Leading up to this, he played one final season with the Grizzlies before being a part of a draft day trade that sent him, Brian Cardinal, Jason Collins, and Kevin Love to the Minnesota Timberwolves, while the Grizzlies received Marko Jaric, Antoine Walker, Greg Buckner, and OJ Mayo. But after just one season in Minnesota, Miller would be on the move again, this time landing with the Washington Wizards. This deal sent the 5th overall pick in the 2009 draft, Alexei Petrov, Etan Thomas, and Darius Songalia to the Timberwolves, while Randy Foye and Miller would join the Wizards. This would be another one-year pit stop that culminated in missing the postseason. After being sick of not seeing the playoffs, Miller would join LeBron James, Dwayne Wade, and Chris Bosh in signing with the Miami Heat in the 2010 offseason. Miller was the perfect addition to this big three, as the Stars all struggled with outside shooting, which likely would have led to a detrimental lack of floor spacing. He would come off the bench as James and Wade would take up the starting wing spots. Despite Miller's scoring numbers being nearly cut in half from just the season before in Washington, it was clear that he was more than willing to sacrifice individual stats for the team's success. Miller would make it out of the first round for the first time in his career, as the Heat would make it to the NBA Finals, where they were unfortunately shocked by the Dallas Mavericks and sent home in 6 games. But they would be back in the finals the following season, this time taking on the Oklahoma City Thunder. And the veteran Heat team would prove to be too much for the Thunder, and they would win this series in just 5 games, giving Miller the first ring of his entire career. In the 2012-13 season, he would add another ring to his resume, this time taking down the San Antonio Spurs in a hard-fought 7-game series. Shockingly, Miami would waive him from the team after this season, and he would make his return to the Memphis Grizzlies. Miller played a larger role in Memphis, leading to him seeing a spike in points per game. Memphis would make the postseason, however, they ran into an elite Oklahoma City Thunder team that they would fall to in 7 games. In the offseason, he would run it back with LeBron, this time in Cleveland. With Miller being 34 years old at the time, he was far from being the contributor that he once was, but he was still an elite shooter. He would only average 7.3 minutes per game in the finals, and they would be taken down by the Golden State Warriors in 6 games. He would then spend the final 2 years of his career with the young Denver Nuggets team, where he would mainly serve as a mentor. And as of February 2023, Miller is a basketball agent for LIFT Sports Management, a company that he founded alongside Donnie McGrath, who is a former Providence College basketball player. They are an athlete representation service that works with highly skilled prospects. Up next is a player from this draft class who had their career majorly altered due to an injury. DeMar Johnson would share the floor with Kenyon Martin at the University of Cincinnati, where he would be named as an all-conference player. Scouts were very interested in his athletic ability and his elite deep ball, along with his versatility that allowed him to play the point guard, shooting guard, or small forward positions. However, with him being only 1 year removed from high school, there were some serious concerns about him being shoved into the NBA. Despite this, he was still drawing comparisons to Scottie Pippen, leading to him being selected with the 6th overall pick by the Atlanta Hawks. In his first 2 years in the league, he would struggle scoring around the basket due to his slim frame. Despite this, he did show a lot of promise with his outside shot, shooting 36% from 3 in his 2nd season. However, this season would be cut short, and Johnson would also miss the entirety of the 2002-2003 season due to suffering a broken neck that came as a result of a car he was in crashing into a tree, and it ultimately caught on fire. This was a brutal wreck that caused Johnson to crack 4 vertebrae in his neck, and he was nearly paralyzed. While it was a miracle that he could even make a return to the NBA, this injury would bring his development to a complete halt and led to Johnson never breaking double digits in per-game scoring. He would receive his second chance with the New York Knicks, where he spent one season, playing 21 games and even starting in one. This would also be his first trip to the playoffs. However, it would be short-lived as the Knicks were swept in the first round by the New Jersey Nets. He would spend the next 3 seasons with the Denver Nuggets playing a very similar role. Johnson and the Nuggets would make the playoffs in all 3 of his years with the team, every time being defeated in 5 games in the first round. The first defeat came in the 2004-2005 season at the hands of the San Antonio Spurs. Second, losing to the Los Angeles Clippers, and the last season to the San Antonio Spurs once again, where he did not play. Johnson would spend the final season of his NBA career with the San Antonio Spurs, where he would only play in 5 games, sadly being forced into retirement at only 27 years of age. As of January 2023, Johnson was selected to be the assistant coach of the West Virginia men's basketball team. They would make the NCAA tourney last year, but they were eliminated by Maryland in the first round. Hopefully, they make a deeper run this season. Shockingly, the 7th overall pick would also have their career impacted due to a string of injuries. Chris Mihm entered the 2000 NBA draft after consecutive nods as an all-conference player. He was a skilled 7-footer who could not be stopped in the paint and moved especially well for his size. There were definitely some doubts about his lateral quickness and if he was effective enough in big moments. However, scouts were still comparing him to Brad Daugherty. Despite being picked 7th overall by the Chicago Bulls, he would be traded to the Cleveland Cavaliers for Jamal Crawford and cash considerations. Mihm would serve as a serviceable starting big man for the Cavs in his rookie year, but he had his season cut short due to injuries. Despite this, he would still earn an appearance on the All-Rookie team, and he would remain on the Cavs throughout the 2003-2004 season before the team would trade him midway through the 2004-2005 season after not showing much development. He would be part of a deal that sent him, Ricky Davis, and Michael Stewart to the Boston Celtics for Eric Williams, Tony Battie, and Kendrick Brown. A change of scenery did not do much for Mihm though, and his numbers were very comparable to those that he put up in Cleveland. He would make his first postseason appearance this season, but he and the Celtics were swept in the first round by the Indiana Pacers. In the offseason, Mihm would once again be traded, this time to the Los Angeles Lakers. The deal sent Mihm, Chucky Atkins, and Marcus Banks to the Lakers, and in return, Gary Payton and Rick Fox landed in Boston. He played a much larger role with the Lakers and saw a spike in his scoring numbers, culminating in him scoring 10.2 points per game in the 2005-2006 season, which would be the only time in his career that he would crack double digits. However, he would have his season cut short due to an ankle injury that would keep him sidelined for the entirety of the 2006-2007 season. Mihm would lose the mobility that made him such a promising prospect, and he would never be the same player following his injury. In his final 2 years in the league spent with the Lakers, he would quickly be given a bench role and rarely saw the floor, clocking nearly 3 minutes in the playoffs in the season of his return, and played in just 41 games in his final 2 seasons in the league. After giving up basketball, Mihm returned to his university to complete his studies in 2012 and graduated with a degree in psychology and a minor in communications. Now it's time to break down the career of the player that Mihm got traded for on draft night. Despite not receiving any accolades in his sole season at the University of Michigan, Jamal Crawford's talent was undeniable. He had a generational handle and was the pure definition of a hooper, even in college. However, some scouts still believe that he had to develop both mentally and physically and that he needed to get better defensively. Despite this, he still drew comparisons to players like Ron Harper. As previously mentioned, he was drafted by the Cleveland Cavaliers but was traded to the Chicago Bulls on draft day. He got off to a slow start in the league, shooting only 35.2% from the field in his rookie season and having his second season cut short due to injuries. With this part of his career out of the way, in the next season he would break through as an essential part of the offense, breaking the double-digit points per game threshold with 10.7. In the 2003-2004 season, his final with Chicago, Crawford would prove to be a lethal offensive weapon, averaging 17.3 points and 5.1 assists per game, while being almost a full-time starter for the Bulls. After this season, he would be traded along with Jerome Williams to the New York Knicks, and in return, the Bulls received Othella Harrington, Dikembe Mutombo, Cesare Trabonsky, and Frank Williams. Crawford fit in extremely well with this young roster, and he was able to continue flourishing as a starter. His scoring numbers would take a slight hit in his second season with the team, as head coach Larry Brown made the career-altering decision of giving Crawford a sixth-man role. But eventually, he would go back to being a starter in the 2007 to 2008 season, where he started in all 80 games that he played in. This caused him to average 20.6 points and 5.0 assists per game, the most points per game that he would average throughout his career. Midway through the 2008 to 2009 season, Crawford would be part of a three-team trade. Crawford was sent to the Golden State Warriors, Zach Randolph and Marty Collins were sent to the Los Angeles Clippers, and in return the Knicks received Al Harrington, Tim Thomas, and Cuttino Mobley. He would start for the Warriors for the remainder of the year, keeping near identical averages to what he was putting up in New York that season. However, over the offseason, he would be dealt yet again, this time to the Atlanta Hawks. The deal sent Crawford to Atlanta, and in return, the Warriors would receive AC Law and Speedy Claxton. From this point on, Crawford would serve as a permanent sixth man unless injuries led to him being forced to start. He would provide the Hawks with an elite scoring option off the bench, and it would propel them to a playoff run. He would go on to win his first Sixth Man of the Year award in this season as well. Along with this season would be the first time in his career that Crawford saw the postseason, but it would be a short-lived run, with the Orlando Magic sweeping them in the second round. The following season, the Hawks would see more success in the postseason, getting their revenge on the Orlando Magic in the first round, winning the series in 6 games, then falling in the second round in 6 games to the Chicago Bulls. In the following offseason, he signed with the Portland Trail Blazers, and he led the league in free throw percentage at an elite 92.7%. However, this was the most notable thing to come from this season, as the Blazers would fail to make the postseason. In the following offseason, he would sign with the Los Angeles Clippers, where he would go on to have the most successful run of his career. Despite having a talented roster over this 5-year run that included players such as Chris Paul, Blake Griffin, DeAndre Jordan, and Lou Williams, along with Crawford, they would fail to ever make it past the second round of the playoffs. Along with this, he would establish himself as arguably the greatest sixth man of all time, as he won the award 2 additional times in 2014 and 2016. After being waived from the Clippers in the 2017 offseason, he would sign with the Minnesota Timberwolves, where he played a very similar role as he did in Los Angeles. This season would also mark Crawford's final trip to the playoffs, where he and the Timberwolves were eliminated in the first round in 5 games by the Houston Rockets. In the 2018 offseason, he would sign with a young and rebuilding Phoenix Suns team on a veteran minimum contract. While not much winning came from this season, Crawford would make history as the oldest player to score 50 points in a game, and the most points in history by a sixth man, with his 51-point scoring outburst against the Dallas Mavericks. Despite this historic feat, he would just play in one more NBA game for the Brooklyn Nets after signing with the team in the 2019 offseason. As of 2022, Crawford has been featured as an NBA analyst across TNT, NBA TV, and various social media platforms. While the 9th pick in the 2000 NBA draft would go on to spend over a decade in the league, he would struggle to make a huge impact for the most part of his career. Despite not earning any prestigious awards in college, Joel Przybilla had the ideal size and build of a traditional center around this time. However, he truly is a testament of how low the bar was set for centers in the 2000s. Scouts were certain that he would translate well as a shot blocker and a rebounder as a result of his 7'1", 260-pound frame, but they were skeptical about what he could do outside of this. He drew comparisons to Luke Longley, and the Houston Rockets selected him with the 9th overall pick. But later on in the draft, he would be traded to the Milwaukee Bucks for Jason Collier and a first-round pick. Scouts really knocked it out of the park, as Przybilla greatly struggled as a scorer, averaging only 0.8 points per game, but he did well as a rebounder and a shot blocker. He would continue to see a diminished role with the Bucks throughout his first 3 years before they traded him early into his 4th season with the team. A 3-team deal landed him with the Hawks, where he would finish out the season before being dealt yet again, this time to the Portland Trail Blazers. In his first season with Portland, he set a career high in points per game with 6.4, and the following season would mark his career high in blocks with 2.3 per game. However, he would start to show signs of regression through the tail end of his 8-year stint with Portland. Midway through the 2010-11 season, he would be traded to the Charlotte Bobcats for Gerald Wallace. This was a controversial trade, as it was a clear sign that the Bobcats were tanking for a chance at a lottery pick. After 1 year in Charlotte, Przybilla would return to Portland, where he played in 27 games and started in 19. In the 2012-13 season, he would make yet another return, this time coming back to the Bucks, where he would play his final 12 games of his career. He now resides in Wisconsin and enjoys hunting and fishing in his free time, along with raising livestock and growing crops. Rounding out the top 10 picks of the 2000 NBA draft is a point guard who went on to be a solid bench player for a handful of teams, but recently found himself in trouble. Keon Dooling was coming off of an all-conference nod in his first year at Missouri. In college, Dooling was a one-man show on offense. He could poster almost anybody on the floor and had an incredible outside shot. But some were worried about how he would perform at the point guard position in the NBA, as he struggled passing the ball, as he was viewed as more of a pure scorer, earning him a fair share of Steve Francis comparisons. He was selected 10th overall by the Orlando Magic, but was traded to the Los Angeles Clippers along with Corey Maggette, Derek Strong, and cash considerations for a future first-round pick on draft day. Dooling would get off to an extremely slow start in the league, starting in only 2 games in his first 3 years of the league. However, in his 4th season with the Clippers, he would start in 24 out of 58 games that he played in. Despite this, his scoring numbers remained similar to when he was coming off of the bench, averaging around 6 points per game. When he was given the chance in the 2003-2004 season, he shot an abysmal 38.9% from the field and 17.4% from 3. After this season, Dooling would sign with the Miami Heat, where he served as a bench player. His numbers would plummet from the previous season in Los Angeles. However, he received another chance in the following offseason with the Orlando Magic. But once again, he would struggle to recapture the offensive prowess that he possessed in college. In the 2008 offseason, he was traded to the New Jersey Nets, where he would spend the next 2 years. In his first season in New Jersey, he set a career high in points at 9.7 per game. He was beginning to round out his game a little bit more and become more of a passer like scouts wanted to see from him coming out of college. Despite this, the Nets would let him walk in free agency, and he would sign to the Milwaukee Bucks the 2010-11 season. He would crack 3 assists per game for just the second time in his career this season with Milwaukee, but it would not be enough for the team to re-sign him, and he joined the Boston Celtics in the following season. With Dooling now in his early 30s, he would begin to play less and less, only seeing the floor in 46 games as a Celtic before signing with the Memphis Grizzlies in what would be his final season. In the 2012-13 season, Dooling played in just 7 games, but over that stretch he had the best field goal percentage and second best three-point percentage of his entire career. While this would only culminate in 4.4 points per game, it proved that if he was drafted to a team that could have developed him the right way, there is a chance that he could have been a solid talent in the NBA. As of February 2023 though, Keon Dooling was sentenced to prison for his role in defrauding the NBA's health and welfare plan. He was sentenced to 30 months in prison per an announcement from the U.S. Attorney's Office. And I'm sure that's not quite the life that he must have imagined after being in the NBA. Today we're continuing our series of seeing what happened to each of the top 10 picks of every draft class. In today's video, we're going to tackle the 2001 class. Out of 57 players drafted in this class, 49 of them would play in an official NBA game. Now, unlike the 2000 class that only saw 3 All-Stars, 8 would be named All-Stars in this group. However, out of those 8 All-Stars, only 3 of them would be selected in the top 10. Now we're going to start it off today with potentially one of the biggest busts in recent history. While we know the player that Kwame Brown would develop into in the NBA, coming into the league, many thought that he would be a revolutionary player. He made the jump straight from high school, potentially a choice that would go on to cost him millions of dollars. Leading up to the draft, scouts could not find many flaws in his game. He ran the floor well, especially for a player of his size, could jump out of the gym, was a great playmaker, and a very talented rim protector. Due to him only being months removed from high school, there were obviously some concerns on if he would be strong enough to control the paint like he did against the kids his age. The Washington Wizards, though, did not hesitate to take him with the first overall pick, giving him the chance to receive mentorship from Michael Jordan. But as we know today, Jordan was not always the best teammate, and he would have a negative impact on Brown's career. One of the worst moments between the two would come in a scrimmage during Brown's rookie year, in which Jordan would nearly bring him to tears. Allegedly, things would reach a boiling point when Jordan said, "You know what, I'm actually not going to read this. I am going to put it on screen for you guys to read, but yeah, I don't know if I can say those words without getting demonetized, nor would I like to." But Yeah, you get the point. Brown had grown up idolizing Jordan, as many did around that time, and hearing this from his childhood hero would nearly bring him to tears. When speaking about the moment, Brown was quoted as saying, "It was pretty rough, but that's Michael Jordan. You deal with it. You learn you're a rookie and you're not going to get calls. But sometimes I felt all alone out there, like I was surrounded by sharks." Whether it was due to the environment around the Wizards team at the time, or if Brown was never meant to thrive in the NBA right out of high school, things would fail to click in his rookie season, with him only starting in 3 out of 57 games that he played in. He shot an abysmal 38.7% from the field, and many were quick to label him as a bust already. He would not do much to help his case through the remaining 3 seasons that he spent in Washington either. Individually, his best season would come in the 2003 to 2004 season, where he averaged 10.9 points per game, the only time in his career that he would actually average double-digit points per game. Along with this, he averaged 7.4 rebounds, which would also be a career high up until his retirement. However, as a team, the 2004-2005 season would be his most successful year, where Washington would clinch a playoff berth. While the team would make it to the second round of the playoffs after eliminating the Chicago Bulls in 6 games, the Heat would end their season in a sweep. In this playoff run, Brown would only play in 3 games, and he was suspended for the rest of the year because of philosophical differences. In the offseason, Brown would be traded to the Los Angeles Lakers along with LaRon Profit for Caron Butler and Chucky Atkins. While things didn't work out well with Jordan, many hoped that playing alongside Kobe Bryant would revive Brown's already failing career, but this would not be the case either. Bryant, similar to Jordan, was beyond the point of babysitting young players with potential and waiting for them to develop their games. When speaking about his time with Brown, Bryant was quoted as saying, "But like the game before we traded for Pau, we're playing Detroit and I had 40 points towards the end of the game. This was back when Detroit had Rasheed Wallace, Chauncey Billups, and those guys, so we had no business being in the game. So down the stretch of the game, they put in a box and won. So I'm surrounded by these players, Detroit players, and Kwame is under the basket all by himself, literally like all by himself. So I pass him the ball, he bobbled it, and it goes out of bounds. So we go back to the timeout and I'm upset, right? He goes, "I was wide open." Yeah, I know. This is how I'm talking to him. Like during the game, I said, "You're going to be open again, Kwame, because Rasheed is just totally ignoring you." He said, "Well, if I'm open, don't throw it to me." I was like, "Huh?" He said, "Don't throw it to me?" I said, "Why not?" He said, "Well, I'm nervous. If I catch it and he foul me, I won't make the free throws." I said, "Hell no." I go to Phil Jackson, I say, "Hey Phil, take him out of the game." He's like, "Nah, let him figure it out." So we lose the game. I go to the locker room. I'm steaming. I'm furious. Then finally I get a call. They said, "You know what? We got something that's happening with Pau." I was like, all right, cool. That's what I had to deal with the whole year. It was clear that even this early in his career, Brown's confidence in his game was completely shot, and as we know now, it would never return. Whether it was his time with Jordan or lack of success early on in the league, it was clear that even Kwame himself didn't think much of himself as a basketball player. After a short 2.5 season stint with the Lakers, Brown would be a part of a package deal that landed the Lakers Pau Gasol. The deal sent Brown, Javaris Crittenton, the rights to Aaron McKie, the draft rights to Marc Gasol, and 2 future first-round picks to the Memphis Grizzlies for Pau Gasol and a second-round pick. After finishing the year with the Grizzlies, Kwame would once again be on the move, this time landing in Detroit on a 2-year, $8 million deal. He played out the entirety of his contract before signing a 1-year veteran minimum deal with the Bobcats. Despite showing little to no promise at this point of his career outside of an interior defender, Brown was still able to find some teams willing to take a risk on him. He had a solid season with the Bobcats, serving as the team's starting center in 50 out of 66 games that he played in. However, he was still far from the generational talent that many thought he could have been. After 1 year with Charlotte, he would sign a 1-year deal with the Warriors, where he played in just 9 games, and in the final year of his letdown career, he signed with the Philadelphia 76ers. Despite starting in half of the games that he played in, he was only able to muster up 1.9 points per game. Now, since his retirement, Brown has spent time covering the league as an analyst for multiple companies such as ESPN and Fox Sports. The second overall pick in this year's draft class would go on to be a premier defender and one of the 8 All-Stars from this class. Tyson Chandler is another player from this year's draft class that would make the intimidating jump of joining the NBA straight out of high school. Coming into the draft, scouts would be head over heels for his athletic ability as a 7-footer and his ability to protect the rim, but there were some doubts that he would be able to guard some of the stronger centers in the league, especially this early on in his career. On draft day, he would be selected 2nd overall by the Los Angeles Clippers, but they would quickly trade his draft rights and Brian Skinner to the Chicago Bulls for Elton Brand. He spent his first 5 seasons with the Bulls, where he struggled to break through as as a full-time starter. Despite this, he was already showing signs of being an elite blocker and rebounder, averaging 1.4 blocks per game and 7.7 rebounds per game throughout his time with Chicago. In the 2006 offseason, the Bulls would decide to pursue Ben Wallace and in turn traded Chandler to the New Orleans Hornets for PJ Brown and J.R. Smith. This would pair him up with Chris Paul, leading to one of the top pick-and-roll duos in the league. After his retirement, Chandler would reminisce on the duo, saying, "I never had a problem with CP because I knew he wants to win. I can ride with anybody that's putting in the work like that and challenging you. He has a right to challenge you. Great players are going to do that because he's trying to take it to another level. You want to win." That's like CP's whole thing. Even the little dirty stuff he do or whatever, CP is a competitor. He's one of the best competitors that the game has had. Everybody don't take it the right way. But if you can appreciate a competitor, then you can appreciate the game, then you can appreciate him. He would go on to say, "It was a nice connection. We can read each other. It was like playing a video game." Chandler would remain a member of the Hornets for 3 seasons. However, in the 2009 offseason, he would once again be traded. This time, the deal would send him to the Charlotte Bobcats, and in return, the Hornets would receive Emeka Okafor. He would only remain on the Bobcats for 1 season before being traded yet again, this time to the Dallas Mavericks. This deal would send Chandler and Alexis Ajinka to the Mavericks, and in return, the Bobcats would receive Eduardo Najera, Matt Carroll, their Eric Dampier trade chip, and cash considerations. While Chandler would only be with the team for a single season in the 2010-11 season, he would still make the most of it. He started in every game that he played in for the first time in 2 years, and along with this, it would be the first time that he averaged double-digit points per game since the 2007-8 season. He played a massive role in the team making the postseason and a deep playoff run. He played incredibly well alongside Dirk Nowitzki, who was never a player that thrived on the defensive end of the ball, whereas Chandler was one of the league's premier defenders. In the playoffs, Dallas would eliminate the Portland Trailblazers in the first rounds in 6 games, sweep the Los Angeles Lakers in the second round, and get past the Oklahoma City Thunder in just 5 games before taking on the Miami Heat in the NBA Finals. This was against the big 3 of LeBron James, Dwayne Wade, and Chris Bosh, so many around the NBA world believed there was no way that Dallas would be any match for them. Despite this, they would do the impossible and win the series in a hard-fought 6 games. Throughout the series, Chandler averaged a very respectable 9.7 points, 8.8 rebounds, 1.2 steals, and 1.2 blocks per game, while shooting an elite 59.4% from the field. Despite coming off of a title, Mavericks higher-ups would decide to break up the team's core, leading Chandler to be a part of a 3-team trade, sending him to the New York Knicks. His first season with the Knicks would be the best individual season of Chandler's career. He averaged 11.3 points, 9.9 rebounds, and 1.4 blocks per game, while shooting a league-high 67.9% from the field. This would be enough to earn him an All-NBA nod, and he also brought home the Defensive Player of the Year award. Following season saw him average a double-double for the first time in his career and earning his sole All-Star appearance. After 3 years with the Knicks, Chandler would return to the Mavericks in the 2014 offseason alongside Raymond Felton in exchange for Shane Larkin, Wayne Ellington, Jose Calderon, Samuel Dalembert, and 2 second-round picks. While Chandler averaged another double-double this season, it would not be enough for Dallas to win another championship with him on the roster, as they would lose to the Rockets in 5 games in the first round. After this season, he would join the Phoenix Suns on a 4-year, $52 million deal. He would remain with the team through 3 seasons before the Suns bought out the final year of his contract early into the season. As an unrestricted free agent, Chandler would sign a 1-year deal with the Los Angeles Lakers. After having a disappointing season there, Chandler would sign back with the Suns and then bounce back to the Lakers in the 2018-19 season. In the offseason, he would be traded to the Houston Rockets, where he would finish out his NBA career. Despite being a decent contributor, it was clear that Father Time had finally caught up to Chandler, as he was 37 years old in the 2019-20 season. After retirement, he would return to the Mavericks for a 3rd time, this time as the team's development coach in 2021. The player selected with the 3rd overall pick would potentially go on to be the best player that this class had to offer. Pau Gasol is another player from this class who did not take the traditional route to get to the NBA. However, whereas scouts were a bit skeptical on how the other prospects' games would translate to the NBA, they were very confident in what they saw with Pau Gasol. He played professionally overseas in Spain against grown men for a considerable amount of time before declaring for the draft. Along with this, many were high on his ability to play almost any position on the court, his decision-making, ability to handle the ball, especially for a player of his size, and he was thought of in many circles as the most complete player this class Jazz had to offer. While the Atlanta Hawks would select Pau Gasol with a 3rd overall pick, he would quickly be traded to the Memphis Grizzlies along with Brevin Knight and Lorenzen Wright for Sharif Abdur-Rahim and the draft rights to Jamal Tinsley. Gasol would quickly prove many of the scouts right in his rookie season, showing that he was already a complete player despite being only 21 years old. He averaged 17.6 points, 8.9 rebounds, 2.7 assists, and 2.1 blocks per game. He would quickly take over as the team's starting power forward, only coming off of the bench in 3 games out of the 82 that he played in. This would be more than enough for him to bring home the 2001 to 2002 Rookie of the Year award, and it was clear that Gasol had a very bright future in front of him. While he would go on to continue improving his game and taking over as the most talented player on the Grizzlies roster, they failed to put enough talent around him for them to make any real noise in the playoffs. The 2005 to 2006 season, Pau would ascend to stardom as he earned his first All-Star game nod. He was quickly becoming one of the best big men in the league, but only a season and a half later, the Grizzlies would make the tough decision to move on from him. This deal sent Gasol and a 2nd-round pick to the Los Angeles Lakers, and in return, the Grizzlies received Kwame Brown, Javaris Crittenton, Aaron McKie, 2 future 1st-round draft picks, and Marc Gasol. This deal would completely revitalize the Lakers, and Gasol would prove to be a perfect running mate alongside Kobe Bryant. In a pre-recorded message played at Gasol's jersey retirement, Kobe was quoted as saying, "I don't win those championships without Pau. The city of LA doesn't win those 2 championships without Pau Gasol." We know that, everybody knows that. I look forward to the day when he's there giving his speech at center court. It's going to be an awesome night. In their first season together, the Lakers would make a trip to the NBA Finals. However, they would fall in a hard-fought 6-game series against the Boston Celtics. This would clearly leave a very sour taste in the Lakers' mouths, and they would make a big jump over the offseason. Pau made his return to the All-Star team after a 2-year hiatus. Along with this, the Lakers would go on a tear in the playoffs, taking down the Utah Jazz in 5 games in the first round, the Houston Rockets in 7 games in the second round, the Denver Nuggets in 6 games in the Western Conference Finals, before handily defeating the Orlando Magic in only 5 games in the NBA Finals. The 2009 to 2010 season, Kobe and Pau would once again run the league, both making the All-Star game. In the postseason, they got past the Oklahoma City Thunder in the first round in 6 games, swept the Utah Jazz in the second round, took down the Phoenix Suns in 6 games in the Western Conference Finals, before meeting the Boston Celtics once again in the NBA Finals. This time, the Lakers would get the best of the Celtics and exact their revenge in a legendary 7-game series. Pau would have one more All-Star appearance in his final 4 seasons as a member of the Lakers, but as the team's core continued to age, they would not be able to make another trip to the NBA Final. In the 2014 offseason, he would decide to sign with the Chicago Bulls in hopes of having a bigger role. He would get exactly what he wanted and made the All-Star game in both of his seasons in Chicago, but with LeBron James in the same conference, they were unable to make any especially deep playoff runs. After his contract expired in Chicago, he would sign a 2-year deal with the San Antonio Spurs. In his first season in San Antonio, Gasol was now 36 years old and understandably beginning to regress a little bit. This would lead to him relinquishing his role as a full-time starter. Around mid-season of his 3rd season with the Spurs, Gasol would have his contract bought out and he would sign with the Milwaukee Bucks to close out what would be the final season of his career. Due to a foot injury, he would miss the entirety of the 2019 to 20 season and call it a career right there. After retirement, Gasol now serves as a UNICEF ambassador and a member of the IOC Athletes Commission. Up next is another player that likely would have benefited from not declaring for the draft straight out of high school. Coming into the draft, many thought that Eddie Curry was the future of the traditional skill set at the center position. He was earning constant comparisons to Shaquille O'Neal and even earned the nickname Baby Shaq. He was constantly playing through double and triple teams in high school, and even that was not enough to stop him. However, similar to Shaq, there were some major concerns about his weight and if he was 100% committed to the game. Despite this, the Chicago Bulls selected him with the 4th overall pick in the 2001 draft. He would remain with the Bulls throughout his first 4 years of his career, his best season with the team coming in the 2004 to 2005 season, where he averaged 16.1 points and 5.4 rebounds per game. Despite this, it would not be enough for the Bulls to keep him around, trading him Antonio Davis and a 2007 first-round pick for Jermaine Jackson, Mike Sweetney, Tim Thomas, 2 first-round picks, and 2 second-round picks. Curry would get off to a hot start during his first 3 seasons of his stint in New York, his best season coming in the 2006 to 2007 season, where he averaged 19.5 points and 7 rebounds per game. However, after the 2007 to 2008 season, it would be the beginning of the end for his NBA career. He showed up to camp following the season very overweight and the farthest thing from basketball shape. As a result of this, he failed to make the cut for head coach Mike D'Antoni's rotation and only played in 3 games the entire season, despite starting in 58 of the 59 games that he played the year prior. Potentially due to his weight, Curry would only clock 7 appearances the next season as he was battling a knee injury. Curry then missed the entirety of the 2010-11 season. However, he would finally get off the team in a trade that would give the Knicks enough cap relief to make a blockbuster deal for Carmelo Anthony. Shortly after that trade was finalized, Timberwolves would buy out his contract and he would become an unrestricted free agent. Despite this, he would sit in free agency until midway through the following season, where he would eventually sign with the Miami Heat. Curry did not play a major role on this team by any means and did not clock any minutes in the playoffs. However, he would still earn a championship ring as Miami took down the San Antonio Spurs in the NBA Finals that year. In the offseason, he would sign with the San Antonio Spurs. However, he failed to make the final roster and would end up being claimed by the Dallas Mavericks. He participated in 2 games in what would be his final season in the league. After his retirement, he would settle down in Texas, building a family of 6 children, and committed himself to helping others. The 5th overall pick would go on to be one of the most electric players of the entire draft class. Coming into the draft, Jason Richardson was fresh off an all-conference selection. Scouts were very high on his scoring and athletic ability, and he was a very skilled perimeter defender. While there were not too many gripes about his game, many felt as if he didn't really have the potential to be a franchise-changing player. Richardson's best individual season in his 6 seasons with the Warriors would come in the 2005-2006 season, where he set a career high in points per game with 23.2. He would also play a crucial role in the historic We Believe Warriors roster that defied the odds. Heading into the season, Golden State had missed the postseason in the past 12 seasons. However, they would sneak into the playoffs as the 8th seed. As expected, no one had any hope in them, and it appeared to be such a lopsided matchup against the 1st seed in the Western Conference, the reigning MVP in Dirk Nowitzki. But Richardson and the Warriors would do the impossible and win the series in 6 games. However, reality would set in the second round, and they were eliminated by the Utah Jazz in just 5 games. In the offseason, Richardson would be moved from the team along with the draft rights to Jamario Davidson to the Charlotte Bobcats for the draft rights of Brandon Wright. This was a terrible Bobcats roster, and Richardson was free to shoot at will. Midway through the 2008-2009 season, he was traded to a contending Phoenix Suns team. The deal sent Richardson, Jared Dudley, and a 2nd-round pick to Phoenix for Boris Diaw, Raja Bell, and Sean Singletary. This would give the Suns an elite backcourt duo of Steve Nash and Jason Richardson. While Richardson once again played very well, it was not enough to take the Suns contenders, and after 2.5 seasons with the team, he would once again be traded, this time to the Orlando Magic. The deal sent Richardson, Hedo Turkoglu, and Earl Clark to the Magic, and in return the Suns received Vince Carter, Marcin Gortat, Mikhail Petrus, 1st-round pick, and cash consideration. With Richardson beginning to show signs of aging and losing his once notorious athleticism, he would begin to take a step back as a member of the Magic. However, he was still a very serviceable starting shooting guard. After finishing out the 2011-12 season, he would be traded to the Philadelphia 76ers in a blockbuster deal surrounding Dwight Howard joining the LA Lakers. Richardson was still averaging around 10 points a game in Philadelphia. However, he would suffer a knee injury that allowed him to play in just 33 games in the 2012-13 season and missed the entirety of the final year. When he made a return in what would be his final season, Richardson began to be forced into a bench role for the first time in 3 seasons. At the conclusion of the season, he chose to make the graceful exit from the league, mainly due to his injury. In 2021, Richardson made his return to basketball, joining the Big 3 League as a member of Tri-State, where he began playing at an MVP level. Last season, he averaged 16.0 points, 8.7 rebounds, and 2.4 assists per game, along with having the 3rd most steals in the league. The number 6 pick in the 2001 NBA draft was an elite 3-point shooter. Shane Battier entered the NBA coming off of an NCAA title at Duke. Scouts were very high on his outside shot and his team-first mindset. However, there were definitely some questions if he was athletic enough to keep up in the NBA. The Memphis Grizzlies did not hesitate to add him to their roster with the 6th overall pick, and he would immediately show that he was ready for the pros, starting in every game that he played in his rookie year. He averaged what would go on to be career high in points, rebounds, assists, and steals per game with 14.4, 5.4, 2.8, and 1.6 respectively. This was enough for him to be named to the all-rookie team. While this season would go on to be the best statistically of his career, he would learn to take a step back for the team's success. While the Grizzlies would consistently make the playoffs towards the tail end of his 5-year stint with the team, they would fall short of winning a single game in their 3 playoff appearances. In the 2006 offseason, the Grizzlies would decide to move on from Battier, trading him to the Houston Rockets for Stromile Swift and draft rights to Rudy Gay. Despite taking over a near full-time role with the Rockets, he would still not see much of a statistical improvement and served mainly as a spot-up shooter and an elite defender. He would spend 4.5 seasons in Houston before he would be traded back to Memphis, trading him and Ish Smith to the Houston Rockets for Hasheem Thabeet, Damari Carroll, and a future first-round pick. After finishing out the 2010-11 season coming off of the bench for the Grizzlies, Battier would sign with the Miami Heat, who were fresh off of a loss to the Dallas Mavericks in the previous year's NBA Finals. He would take a reduced role with the Heat, mainly coming off of the bench. However, it was for the greater good, and he served an essential role of spacing the floor. In his first 2 years with the Heat, they would win back-to-back titles, the first over Oklahoma City and the second over San Antonio. The 2013-14 season would be his last in the league, but he was still a very serviceable rotation player and even spent 56 games as a starter that year. His elite three ball is something that would never leave him. However, after falling to the Spurs in the finals, he would choose to call it a career. After retirement, he would focus his efforts in the Battier Take Charge Foundation. Despite showing promise early in his career, the 7th overall pick would end up having his NBA career tragically cut short. Eddie Griffin entered the draft coming off of an all-conference season at Seton Hall. Scouts viewed him as a future superstar, comparing him to Tim Duncan. He possessed a solid outside shot for a big man in this era, was an elite rebounder, and a great defender as well. However, there was some concern about his ball handling abilities, and he had some character issues due to altercations with teammates in the past. Despite this, the Houston Rockets did not hesitate to trade for him after the New Jersey Nets selected him with the 7th overall pick. The deal sent Griffin to the Rockets, and the Nets would receive Richard Jefferson, Jason Collins, and Brandon Armstrong. Griffin had a promising rookie season where he averaged 8.8 points, 5.7 rebounds, and 1.8 blocks per game. However, he struggled to break into the starting rotation. Despite this, he would still make the all-rookie team. In the following season, he started in all but 11 of 77 games that he played in, but his stats still remained stagnant. Things would begin to go wrong for him as he was forced to miss the entirety of the 2003-2004 season due to him entering himself into rehab for substance abuse. Following his time away from the game, Griffin would get a change in scenery with the Minnesota Timberwolves. However, he failed to start in any of the 70 games that he played in. Things would soon begin to look up for him as he started in 27 games in the 2005-2006 season, but he would see sharp declines in all major statistics outside of blocks, where he averaged an impressive 2.1 per game. In March of 2006, Griffin would see off-court issues again get in the way of his career. He allegedly got into a car crash while intoxicated and watching a pornographic film while behind the wheel. While no one at the time knew it, the 2006-2007 season would be the final of Griffin's career in the NBA. He played in only 13 games, being a non-factor for the Timberwolves. Tragically, in August of 2007, Griffin would be in another car accident, this time costing him his life. He allegedly ignored railroad crossing signs before running into a moving train that was carrying flammable substances. The crash caused his vehicle to catch on fire and the plastic granules fueling the flames. Griffin would tragically lose his life in this incident, and due to the fire, dental records had to be used to identify him. Examiners determined that he was over 3 times the legal limit for alcohol in Texas at the time of the crash. He had hoped to begin a flourishing career in basketball overseas in the following season and left a 3-year-old daughter behind him. Up next is another player that would have benefited by spending some time playing in college. Zagna Diop was another player who made the jump right from high school to the NBA. Scouts viewed him as an elite interior defender who blocked shots extremely well in college. In the 2005 offseason, he would sign with the Dallas Mavericks, where he would start in a career-high 45 games. He would set a career high in blocks per game with 1.8 this season, but he still struggled to play a major role. He saw a reduced role in the following season, and midway through the 2007-2008 season, he was dealt to the New Jersey Nets alongside Keith Van Horn, Devin Harris, Trenton Hassell, Maurice Ager, 2 first-round picks, and cash considerations in exchange for Jason Kidd, Malik Allen, and Antoine Wright. He would finish out the year with the Nets before signing back with the Mavericks in free agency, but they would once again trade him midway through the 2008-2009 season, this time to the Charlotte Bobcats. The deal sent Diop to Charlotte. He would play the remaining 5 years with the Bobcats, where he would serve as an end-of-the-bench player, earning starting role in only 11 out of the 133 games that he played in. After retirement, Diop would begin a career in coaching, starting off in the G League, and his most recent job coming as an assistant coach for the Houston Rockets in 2020. The next player had a very short-lived career, having nearly the same number of years in the league and teams played for. Rodney White entered the 2001 draft coming off of an all-conference season at Charlotte. Scouts believe that he was an extremely versatile player who could guard any position. Along with this, he had a great handle and a very solid jump shot as well. The Detroit Pistons would pick him with the 9th overall pick, a choice that would go on to haunt the franchise with future all-star caliber players still on the board. White would go on to only play in 16 games in his rookie season, struggling in almost every facet of the game. In the offseason, he would be dealt to the Denver Nuggets. The deal sent White to the Nuggets for Menk Batir, Don Reed, and a first-round pick. Despite seeing a bigger role in Denver, even starting in 19 games in his first year with the team, White's lack of effort on the defensive end would ultimately lead to his opportunities being squandered. He would once again be traded midway through his 3rd season with the Nuggets, this time being traded to the Golden State Warriors. White and Nikoloz Gizvili would be sent to Golden State, finished out the year with Golden State playing only 16 games. However, it would be the last time that he saw an NBA court. After retirement from the NBA, he would have a successful basketball career overseas, spending his time from 2005 to 2013 playing in various European, Spanish, Puerto Rican, and Filipino leagues. Rounding out the top 10 is a player who spent nearly 2 decades in the league. Joe Johnson is the definition of a bucket. He came into the draft coming off back-to-back all-conference selections. Scouts were in love with his abilities to handle the ball very well and play like a guard despite being 6'7". He had elite passing vision and an incredible ability to score. However, there were some worries that he was too slim for the small forward position in the NBA. The Boston Celtics selected him with the 10th overall pick, and despite getting off to a relatively good start in his rookie year, he would be traded midway through it to the Phoenix Suns. Johnson, along with Randy Brown, Milt Palacio, and a first-round pick were sent to the Suns for Tony Delk and Rodney Rogers. Johnson would finish out the season with the Suns and work his way up the rotation throughout the next 3 years with the team. In the 2005 offseason, Johnson would be dealt to the Atlanta Hawks in a sign-and-trade that sent Boris Diaw and 2 first-round picks for Johnson. He would come into his own on the Hawks, seeing a substantial statistical spike in his first year in Atlanta, and would go on to make the All-Star game the remaining 6 seasons that he spent with the team. His best year would come in the 2006 to 2007 season, where he averaged 25 points per game, which would be a career high, 4.2 rebounds, 4.4 assists, and 1.1 steals per game, while shooting an elite 47.1% from the field and 38.1% from 3. While Johnson ascended into stardom during his stint with the Hawks, it would not translate into any deep playoff runs for them. In the 2012-13 season, Johnson would once again be traded, this time to the Brooklyn Nets, for Jordan Farmar, Anthony Morrow, Jordan Williams, Johan Petro, Deshaun Stevenson, and a first-round pick. Johnson was 31 years old in his first season with the team and was beginning to show signs of regression. While he was still a very solid scorer, he was beginning to get further and further from the franchise caliber player and perennial all-star that he once was. Despite this, he still pulled out one final all-star year in the 2013-14 season as the Nets beefed up their roster, adding Paul Pierce and Kevin Garnett to the team. While many thought this would launch the team into being title contenders, that would not be the case. Once the Nets chose to go into a full-scale rebuild in the 2015-16 season, Johnson would have his contract bought out and he signed a deal with the Miami Heat. Johnson was still a full-time starter even at the age of 34. However, after this season, he would begin to embrace a bench role. After this season with the Miami Heat, he would sign with the Utah Jazz, and after a full season with that team, he would sign with the Houston Rockets. As a bench player, Johnson was able to focus more on scoring and being a spark off the bench, along with a mentor for younger players. Following the 2017-18 season, with Johnson being now 36 years old, many believe that it would be his last NBA game. He spent the following 3 years playing in the Big 3 League. However, due to COVID running through the Boston Celtics team, they were extremely short-handed and desperate for capable players to fill some roster spots. As a result of this, Johnson was given the opportunity to end his career where it all began. He signed a 10-day contract with the team, and despite only playing in one game for 2 minutes, he hit the sole jumper that he took. Along with this, it was also the longest gap a player has had between playing with the same team, being 19 years and 308 days since his final game that he played with Boston in his rookie season. Since retirement, he has rejoined the Big 3 and has done everything he can to help his son make it to the NBA as well. Today, we're going to be continuing our series of covering the careers of the top 10 draft picks from each draft class of the 2000s. In this episode, we are covering the 2002 draft class. And I will say, this is a pretty middle-of-the-road draft class. While there's some big names and future Hall of Famers that came from this year, it's far from the quality of classes that we're going to discuss in the future. Only 4 players from this class would make an All-Star game, and thus far, only 1 player has been inducted into the Hall of Fame. That's who we're starting it off with. Pick number 1 of the 2002 NBA draft would be Yao Ming. Now, if it hadn't been for injuries, there's certainly a chance that Yao could have gone down as one of the best big men of this era. Coming into the draft, there are a lot of comparisons that could be made with how scouts felt about Yao Ming and the recent hype that surrounded Victor Wembanyama. While the scouts were certainly not as high on Yao Ming as Victor, they believed he was a player who could go on to revolutionize the game and become a potentially unguardable player. He caught the eyes of scouts in the 2000 Summer Olympic Games and continued to turn heads through the 2001 to 2002 campaign in the China Basketball Association while playing for the Shanghai Sharks. In the playoffs that season, he averaged a jaw-dropping 38.9 points and 20.2 rebounds while shooting 76.6% from the field. Scouts were very high on his ability to score around the basket, of course, his shot blocking ability, and his unteachable 7'6" height. While Shaquille O'Neal was the top dog at the center position with his generational strength, some thought Yao Ming's frame could end up being a reasonable counter to the Diesel. However, there were some concerns that even at 7'6", it would not be enough to actually shut down stronger players like Shaquille O'Neal. While Ming had the height as an advantage, he came into the league around 290 pounds. While most players come into the league a bit underweight and still have time to grow into their bodies in the early years of the NBA, this would be one of the few gripes that scouts could come up with at the time. Despite the slight concerns, there were nowhere near enough of them for the Houston Rockets to pass on him with the first overall pick. He would have an immediate impact on the team, averaging 13.5 points, 8.2 rebounds, and 1.8 blocks per game. He also made the All-Star game in only his rookie season. This would be a trend that would continue for the entirety of his career, making him one of the few in NBA history to make the All-Star game every single year that he spent in the league. Of course, there was that one season where he didn't play due to a foot injury, but we're not counting that. Along with the All-Star appearance, Yao Ming would also be named to the 2002 to 2003 All-Rookie team in this season. The following season, Ming would continue to make improvements to his game and put on some weight finally, making him an unmovable force in the paint. In only his second year in the league, he would lead the Rockets to the playoffs. However, they would be bounced in the first round by the Los Angeles Lakers. While it would be almost an impossible task of stopping Shaquille O'Neal in his prime, Ming did an incredible job of slowing him down throughout this series. In their 5 games matched up against each other, O'Neal would only average 16.2 points, 11.2 rebounds, and 2.8 blocks per game while shooting 51.5% from the field. And while those numbers might seem great, they're not that good compared to his regular season stats where he averaged 21.5 points, 11.5 rebounds, and 2.5 blocks per game while shooting a league-leading 58.4% from the field. So I'd say Yao Ming did a pretty good job here. Even today, it's like pulling teeth trying to get a compliment on a fellow big man out of Shaq, but it was clear that Ming had his respect. When talking about him, O'Neal was quoted as saying, "He was very agile, he could play inside, he could play outside, and if he didn't have those injuries, he could have been up there in the top 5 centers to ever play the game." After this promising playoff run, it was clear that if the Rockets wanted to make any noise in the playoffs, they would have to get some help at the wing. While Ming was able to slow down Shaq throughout the series to the best of his abilities, Kobe Bryant was still running rampant and would kill Houston's chances of making it to the second round. As a result of this, the Rockets would make a blockbuster move and add Tracy McGrady to their roster. This would end up creating one of the biggest what-if duos of all time, as both Yao Ming and Tracy McGrady would have their primes cut short due to numerous injuries. However, in their early days as teammates, they would establish themselves as one of the strongest duos that the league had to offer. They once again made an appearance in the playoffs. However, they ran into an incredibly talented Dallas Mavericks team. While the Rockets were able to extend the series to 7 games, they would not be able to close out Game 7 with a win, and once again were sent home packing in the first round. After this season, injuries would sadly play a big role in the remainder of his career. In the 2005 to 2006 season, he was forced to get surgery on the big toe of his left foot, forcing him to miss 21 games. This would coincide with McGrady being forced to miss just under half of the season fighting back spasms that just kept coming back. Late in the year, Ming would once again injure his left foot, this time fracturing it and forcing him into a 6-month recovery process. This injury-ridden season from the team's two top stars would kill any chances that they had of making the playoffs. Early in the 2006 to 2007 season, Ming would once again suffer a crucial injury, this time fracturing the bone under his right knee. Around this time, there were rumblings that he had a genuine shot at MVP, but due to him missing nearly half of the season, those chances would go right out the window. Despite this, he still averaged an elite 25 points, 9.4 rebounds, and 2.0 blocks per game. While Ming missed a substantial amount of time this season, the Rockets were still able to make the playoffs, where they took on the Utah Jazz in the first round. Once again, this was a very hard-fought series by Houston. They would fall just short of advancing to the next round, losing in 7 games. The following season, Ming had his season cut short due to injury yet again. After making it through 55 games in the 2007 to 2008 season, he suffered a stress fracture in his left foot. Over the offseason, he underwent surgery, placing the screws in his foot in hopes of them strengthening it and preventing any future injuries. It would appear that their goal was met, as Yao Ming played in 77 games in the 2008-9 season, the most games that he played in since the 2004 to 2005 season. This season would be Yao's final trip to the playoffs, and it was actually his most successful postseason run. The Rockets were able to get past the Portland Trailblazers in 6 games. However, the Lakers would once again get the best of them in 7 games. Ming would suffer a hairline fracture in his left foot in Game 3 that kept him sidelined for the remaining 4 games of that series. Now, there's a strong chance if this injury didn't occur, the Rockets could have definitely won this series and could have been primed for even a trip to the NBA Finals, some might say. Surgery for this injury would keep him sidelined for the entirety of the 2009 to 2010 season, and before Yao could make his return, the Rockets would trade McGrady from the team, ending what on paper was one of the strongest duos of the era, for they really got a chance to see where it could go. When talking about Ming and their time together, T-Mac was quoted as saying, "Yao was complete. Offensively, he was one of the most skilled players in his time. Left hand, right hand, jump hook, mid-range, free throws. He had it all. He even handled the ball in transition and made the right basketball plays. He was tough, man. He was real tough." In an article that he wrote for ESPN, McGrady said, "When I got traded to the Houston Rockets in 2004, I really didn't know Yao Ming. He'd been in the league a few years, we'd both been to the All-Star game, and we played against each other a few times, but I had never talked to him. I didn't think he could speak any English, and I was worried about that. I thought, how is this going to work? I had just won the last 2 scoring titles with the Orlando Magic, but I was so excited to be playing with a great big man that I knew I was going to have to work with him and feed him the ball. But to do that, we needed communication. When I finally met him, I realized 2 things. He does speak English, and not only does he speak it, he has an amazing sense of humor. I love seeing his personality come out more and more over the years as he got more comfortable in Houston. That's how I really learned what an amazing person he is. He will sometimes just pretend he doesn't speak English. He does that even to this day. Yao is truly a great and humble person. You just can't recognize his accomplishments off the court without seeing his kindness and humbleness off it. I am proud to call Yao my friend. He opened so many doors. He personally put me in position to have a life after basketball. I'm so lucky to have a chance to know him, play with him, and work with him. He has a legacy very few have, and he has been and will continue to be a great influence. It's what he does. It's who he is." After only a 5-game return in the 2010 to 11 season, Ming would suffer a stress fracture in his left ankle, forcing him to miss the remainder of the season. This would be the injury that put an end to his career. Despite only making it 8 years in the league, Ming would finish his career with 8 All-Star appearances, 5 All-NBA selections, a 2002 to 2003 All-Rookie selection, and was inducted into the Hall of Fame in 2016. If he'd been able to stay healthy, it's not really a stretch to believe that he could have lasted probably twice as long as he did, and he would have been able to establish himself as one of the most talented big men of all time, although I'm sure a lot of you already think that is the case. After retirement, Yao would be named as the president of the Chinese Basketball Association and now resides in Shanghai, China. Up next, we got another player that would have their career cut extremely short due to injuries. Coming into the 2002 NBA draft, Jay Williams was one of the most promising prospects that the league had to offer. He was an elite scorer during his 3 years at Duke and was a driving force in the team winning the NCAA championship in the 2000 to 2001 season. Scouts were very high on his court vision, ability to get through the hoop, playmaking ability, and of course his elite jump shot. However, there were definitely some concerns that despite being a skilled playmaker, that he would sometimes shoot the ball a little too much and he was a bit too reckless with the ball at certain times. Despite this, the Chicago Bulls selected him with the 2nd overall pick. He showed a fair amount of promise in his rookie season and took over as the team's starting point guard relatively early on in the season, and he averaged a solid 9.5 points, 2.6 rebounds, 4.7 assists, and 1.1 steals per game. But some of his flaws did shine through, unfortunately. His questionable shot selection led to him shooting pretty spotty at times from the field, and he also averaged 2.3 turnovers per game, but that's not really out of the ordinary for a young guard attempting to adjust to the NBA flow of things. He earned a spot on the 2002 to 2003 All-Rookie team, however, this would sadly be the only season that he actually spent in the NBA. On June 19, 2003, Williams would be involved in a tragic motorcycle accident that would put an end to his NBA career for good. When recounting the event, Williams was quoted as saying, "So I come from Durham, working out. Coach K tells me he thinks I'm going to be different. I feel like I'm going to be different. My shot is better, I'm way more fluid, my condition is way better. So yeah, I literally drove down on my bike to my agent's house in Chicago, about 2.5 miles from where I was downtown, and I was leaving his house. I didn't have any protective gear on, no helmet, no jacket, because there was no helmet law in Illinois at that state of time. Revved my engine once with a new muffler on the back, had the bike in neutral, was fine. Second time I did it louder than the first, and in the middle of my 3rd rev, I just heard the bike go click click. The bike popped up on me out of nowhere, and the next thing I know, when I grab onto the handlebars, man, the bottom part of the wheel spins out, and I'm headed towards a utility pole going 65, 70 miles an hour. Clipped the whole left side of my body. My body flings around in the air. My chest lands on the sidewalk. My legs are kind of up on the curb and the pavement as if I'm laying on my side, like with both knees on top of each other. But my chest is on the grassy knoll area between the curb and the sidewalk, as if I'm laying on my stomach. And it was at that moment I realized something really bad has happened. I thought I was paralyzed, and I felt as if somebody was pouring hot, scalding water on the lower portion of my body. But every time I looked at my hands after touching my legs, I didn't see blood. I mean, I start screaming out right away that I threw it all away. I threw it all away. You're so in tune with your body as an athlete, I just knew right then and there that I didn't think I was ever going to be the same. That sent me into a very, very deep state of depression. In a separate interview when talking about life following the crash, Williams said, "I remember lying in my bed and I'm just tired of being here. I didn't want to be here anymore. I was so afraid to face people, and I didn't really know who I was, and I didn't really want anybody to see me, and I didn't really want to talk to anybody. I didn't want to talk about it. I mean, to the point where I sat there and I had this pair of scissors in my hand. I just kept going on my wrist. I wasn't trying to go sideways. I was going vertical. I didn't want to be here at all." Williams would suffer a fractured pelvis, a severed main nerve in his leg, and 3 torn ligaments in his left knee due to this crash, and it was clear that he would never be able to play in the NBA again. And the Bulls cut him from the roster, but did pay him out $3 million to get through his recovery process. Through this lengthy process, he would become addicted to painkillers along with some other drugs. While this would be the lowest of lows an athlete can find themselves in, and thankfully, Williams didn't act on any of those dark thoughts, and he is still with us today. He's since spent years at ESPN as an NBA analyst before having his show almost canceled in June of 2023 as a part of the company's massive budget cuts. Thankfully, though, he avoided those layoffs and got to keep his show and still works for those companies to this day. The player that went 3rd overall in the 2002 NBA draft class would go on to have a very successful and long career as a starting caliber player. Mike Dunleavy Jr. is the son of Mike Dunleavy, who spent 11 years in the league playing from 1976 to 1990. Just 12 years after his retirement, his son would be ready to make his own mark in the league. Coming into the draft, Dunleavy Jr. would be a member of the ultra-talented Duke team that featured a handful of players that would be taken in this draft class. He was coming off of an all-conference season and won an NCAA title in the 2000 to 2001 season. Scouts were insanely high on his basketball IQ, outside shot, and ability to almost always make the right play on both sides of the ball. However, there were some concerns on if he would be athletic enough to keep up at the NBA level. The Golden State Warriors selected him with the 3rd overall pick in the draft, where he would spend the first 4 seasons of his career. In that time, he would serve mainly as the team's starting small forward. However, towards the tail end of his stint in Golden State, he would begin to take on more of a bench role. Midway through the 2006 to 2007 season, Dunleavy would be traded to the Indiana Pacers. The deal sent Dunleavy, Troy Murphy, Ike Diagu, and Keith McLeod to the Pacers, and in return, they received Steven Jackson, Al Harrington, Sharonis Jasikevičius, and Josh Powell. There were some character concerns around this time surrounding Dunleavy, with the then Warriors GM Chris Mullin saying, "The way Mike performed, the way he conducted himself, and the way we run our organization, we both felt it was something that we wanted." He would get a much larger role with the Pacers in his 2nd season with the team, and he would have the best season of his career, starting in all 82 games and averaging 19.1 points, 5.2 rebounds, and 3.5 assists per game, while shooting a very efficient 42.4% from 3. The following season, he would have his season cut short due to a right knee injury, being only able to play in 14 games. After his injury, he was never able to fully regain his starting role in Indiana. After this season, Dunleavy Jr. signed a 2-year, $6 million deal with the Chicago Bulls. In his 2nd season with the team, he would start in all 63 games that he played in, the first time that he had a full-time starting role since the 2007 to 2008 season. In the 2016-17 season, Dunleavy would be traded along with the rights to Vladimir Veremenko to the Cleveland Cavaliers for Albert Miralles. However, after just 23 games with the team, he would be traded to the Atlanta Hawks along with Mo Williams and a 1st-round pick for Kyle Korver. After finishing out this season, Dunleavy Jr. would retire from the league after 15 years. Back in June of 2023, Dunleavy would be announced as the general manager of the Golden State Warriors. Not a bad gig if you ask me. Up next, we got a player who would thrive in a bench role, putting together a very respectable NBA career. Drew Gooden entered the draft coming off of being named the Player of the Year in the Big 12. Scouts were very high on his versatile offensive game and rebounding ability, but there were some concerns about if he would be big enough to play the power forward position at an NBA level. The Memphis Grizzlies picked him up with the 4th overall pick. However, they would trade him after just 51 games with the team. The deal sent Gooden and Gordon Giricek to the Orlando Magic for Mike Miller, Ryan Humphrey, and 2 draft picks. After 2 seasons with the team, he would be dealt yet again, this time to the Cleveland Cavaliers. Gooden, Anderson Varejao, and Stephen Hunter would land in Cleveland, while Tony Battie and 2 second-round draft picks would be sent to the Magic. Gooden was part of a Cavs roster that took on the San Antonio Spurs in the 2006 to 2007 NBA Finals. This would be the deepest playoff run of his entire career. However, the Spurs would prove to be far too deep of a team for the Cavaliers to keep up with, and they would end up getting swept. In that series, Gooden averaged a very respectable 12.8 points and 8.3 rebounds per game. In the 2008 to 2009 season, Gooden would once again be dealt. This was a huge 3-team trade that sent Gooden, Larry Hughes, Shannon Brown, and Cedric Simmons to the Bulls, Wally Zerbiak, Delonte West, Joe Smith, and Ben Wallace to the Cavaliers, and Ira Newble, Donyell Marshall, and Adrian Griffin to the Seattle Supersonics. Before even spending 1 year with the Chicago Bulls, he was traded along with Cedric Simmons, Andre Nocioni, and Michael Ruffin to the Sacramento Kings for Brad Miller and John Salmons. After 1 game with the Kings, he would have his contract bought out and spent the remainder of the 2008 to 2009 season with the San Antonio Spurs. In the offseason, he signed with the Dallas Mavericks. However, he would be traded before spending a full season with the team. I will say right now, Drew Gooden has been all over the place. This man was getting dealt out like crazy. This deal sending him to the Mavericks would send Gooden, Josh Howard, James Singleton, and Quentin Ross to the Washington Wizards for Caron Butler, Brendan Haywood, and Deshaun Stevenson. Just 4 days after this deal, he was part of a 3-team deal that sent him back to the Los Angeles Clippers. In the following offseason, he signed a 3-year deal with the Milwaukee Bucks where he would play out the entirety of his contract. In the 2013-14 offseason, he signed the final deal of his career, a 3-year contract to bring him back to the Washington Wizards. While most being known for the amount of teams that he's played for rather than his on-court play, Gooden still had a very respectable career, averaging 11.0 points and 7.1 rebounds per game throughout his 14 years in the league. After retirement, Gooden landed a gig with NBC Sports Washington as a broadcaster. Now, the 5th overall pick is potentially the first from this draft class that could be considered a true bust as a result of their on-court play. Coming into the league, the bar was set extremely high for Nicolo Schizvili. He was thought of as a 7-footer with a skill set that made it possible for him to play like a shooting guard. Scouts were in love with his outside shot and his ability to move for his size. Some were even comparing him to a more athletic Dirk Nowitzki. However, the main concern was that he was still a very raw talent. Had he been selected to a different organization, there's certainly a chance that his career could have played out far differently than it had. However, he got off to a very slow start with the Denver Nuggets. While he started in 16 games and played in 81 in his rookie season, he would not play in more than 39 games or start in another game following this year. After 2 full seasons in Denver, he would be traded midway through the 2004 to 2005 season to the Golden State Warriors. The deal sent Schizvili and Rodney White for Eduardo Najera, Luis Flores, and a first-round pick. In the following offseason, he would sign with the Minnesota Timberwolves, but was traded to the Phoenix Suns midway through the season for a second-round draft pick. After playing 12 games with the Suns in the regular season and 4 in their postseason run, he would ultimately retire from the league and begin his overseas career, where he would end up playing in the Spanish League, Italian League, and the Greek League. The player selected 6th overall is another player from this draft class who would have his career cut short due to forces that he couldn't control. Juan Wagner entered the draft coming off of an all-conference appearance at Memphis. Scouts were in love with his quick first step, ability to get to the hoop, and the deep bag he had around the basket. However, it was clear that his shot selection needed to be a bit more refined. The Cleveland Cavaliers still selected him with the 6th overall pick, and things would get off to a solid start, with Wagner having the best season of his entire career in his rookie year. In this season, he averaged 13.4 points, but he wasn't the most efficient from the field, shooting 36.9%. He would begin to see a reduced role as his time in Cleveland went on and would miss the entirety of the 2005 to 2006 season due to Wagner developing ulcerative colitis. The Cavaliers would not pick up their team option on this deal, leading to him becoming a free agent. Wagner's colitis was not responding to any medicine that was prescribed to him, and in 2005, he would have half of his colon removed. In the 2006 offseason, he signed a 2-year deal with the Golden State Warriors. However, he would only spend 1 game with the team before they bought out his contract, and he would be forced into retirement at just the age of 23. Had Wagner not been hampered by his health issues, there's a strong chance that he would have been able to deliver on the promise that he showed in his rookie season. Nowadays, he gets to watch his son DJ play for Kentucky and see if he can make an impact on the court. Now, despite not being one of the 4 players from this draft class to make an all-star appearance, this next player had one of the best careers out of this entire draft class. Ney was one of the few players in this draft class to make the jump straight out of high school and go on to have a very successful career in the NBA. He would play on the Brazilian national team, which interested NBA scouts very much. Coming into the draft, scouts were in love with his athletic ability, how he was able to jump out of the gym, and that he possessed elite speed for his position. This also aided in him being a great shot blocker and a high-energy interior defender. But some felt like he deferred to his teammates a bit too much, and he struggled as a perimeter defender. New York Knicks selected him with the 7th overall pick. However, he would be traded to the Denver Nuggets along with Marcus Camby and Mark Jackson for Antonio McDyess, Frank Williams, and a 2003 second-round draft pick. Nene would have an immediate impact on the team in his rookie season, averaging 10.5 points and 6.1 rebounds per game, while shooting a very efficient 51.9% from the field. He earned a spot on the 2002 to 2003 All-Rookie team. In the following season, he would take over as the team's starting power forward and saw a slight increase in his numbers. His next 2 seasons would be riddled with injuries, unfortunately, causing him to only play in 56 total games. But he would have a great bounce-back year in the 2006 to 2007 season, averaging 12.2 points and 7 rebounds per game. However, his next season would once again be cut short due to injuries, only participating in 16 games. In the 2008 to 2009 season, he would reclaim his starting spot, this time at the center position. He averaged a career high of 14.6 points per game and would have the deepest playoff run of his entire career. They took down the New Orleans Hornets and Dallas Mavericks both in 5 games to set up a matchup against the Los Angeles Lakers, in the Western Conference Finals. Unfortunately, they lost that series in 6 games. Nene would play 2 more full seasons with the Nuggets before being traded during the 2011-12 season. The 3-team deal would ultimately end up with Nene, Brian Cook, and a 2015 second-round pick on the Wizards, JaVale McGee and Ronnie Turiaf on the Nuggets, and Nick Young on the Clippers. Nene would bounce in and out of the starting rotation throughout his time with the Wizards. In the 2016 offseason, he signed a deal with the Houston Rockets where he would end up coming off the bench. Nene was an optimal player in the James Harden-led offense that the Rockets ran around this time. He was never a player who needed the ball in his hands to be effective and was always a great rebounder. Sadly, lingering hip issues would keep him sidelined through the entirety of the 2019-20 season. However, he would be a huge part of a 4-team, 20-player trade where he would end up on the Atlanta Hawks. They would end up waiving Nene, putting an end to his 17-year NBA career. After retiring from basketball, he would become involved with church activities back in Brazil. Up next, we have another player from this draft class that had a solid career as a journeyman. Chris Wilcox entered the draft coming off of an all-conference selection and being a driving force in Maryland, winning the 2001-2002 NCAA title. Scouts were very high on his elite leaping ability for a big man, his deep bag in the post, and his shot blocking ability. However, many thought that he was still a bit of a raw talent and could have used a year or 2 more in college. The Los Angeles Clippers still picked him with the 8th overall pick. This put Wilcox in a very odd spot as the team already had Elton Brand as their center at the time. As a result of this, he struggled to break into the starting lineup consistently during his time with the Clippers. He would remain on the team until midway through the 2005-2006 season, where he was traded to the Seattle Supersonics for Vladimir Radmanovic. Wilcox would take over as the starting power forward for the Supersonics, where he would have the best season of his entire career. The 2006-2007 campaign, he would average 13.5 points and 7.7 rebounds while shooting 52.9% from the field. Along with this, he would start in 81 out of 82 games that he played in. He would see his role diminished in Seattle following this season, and midway through the 2008-2009 season, he was traded to the New York Knicks for Malik Rose. After finishing out the season in New York, he would sign with the Detroit Pistons in free agency. In his 2 seasons with the Pistons, he would jump in and out of the starting lineup, serving as a very consistent option. And in the 2011 offseason, Wilcox would sign with the Boston Celtics, where he would spend the final 2 seasons of his NBA career. He mainly came off the bench in Boston, starting on very rare occasions. Wilcox would retire after 11 years in the league, putting together a very solid career. In 2020, when the virus hit, Wilcox spent a lot of his time creating Wilcox Distribution LLC, which was a company focused on stopping the disease. The player selected with the 9th overall pick was easily one of the best from this draft class, and personally one of my favorites. Mari Stoudemire made the jump from high school straight to the NBA. While this ends up being a career-altering choice in a very negative way for a lot of players, this would certainly not be the case for Stoudemire. Coming into the draft, scouts were very high on his rebounding ability and elite athleticism. There were some skeptics that thought he was not yet mature enough to handle the intricacies of the game at an NBA level. The Phoenix Suns, however, would select him with the 9th overall pick, a decision they would definitely not go on to regret. He almost instantly took over as the team's starting power forward, making an immediate impact on an already contending roster. The 2004-2005 season, Stoudemire would make the first All-Star appearance of his career, averaging a career-high 26 points per game. This could come in part to the Suns adding Steve Nash to their roster. These two would go on to be one of the most dangerous pick-and-roll duos that the league had to offer. Phoenix would make a deep playoff run, sweeping the Memphis Grizzlies in the first round, getting past the Dallas Mavericks in 6 games in the second round. However, they would be eliminated in 5 games in the Western Conference Finals by the San Antonio Spurs. Nash would dedicate a section of a Players Tribune article to Stoudemire saying, "What do they say about men with big hands? They have quick feet?" Mari Stoudemire had both, and he made me look like an artist at times. Thanks, big man. It will always hurt that Phoenix Suns fans didn't get the championship they deserved during our run. Yes, we had some bad luck, but I always look back at it and think I could have made one more shot or not forced a turnover or made a better pass, but I don't regret anything. The arena was always sold out and rocking. It was the time of my life. Nash and Stoudemire would make one more trip to the Western Conference Finals together. However, they would be eliminated again just short of the finals, this time by the Los Angeles Lakers in 6 games. In the following offseason, Stoudemire would make a blockbuster move and sign with the New York Knicks, where eventually Carmelo Anthony would join him later on in the season via a trade. Injuries would begin to take an effect on him following his first year in New York, but he would still be a very serviceable big man. He would have his 2012-13 season cut short after it was announced that he underwent a knee debridement. While he suffered through some knee issues in Phoenix, they became much more serious and frequent during his stint with the Knicks. Following this injury, he would bounce in and out of the starting lineup. While he was far from the all-NBA player that he once was, he was still a very solid option at the power forward position or the center position, wherever the Knicks really needed him to play at the time. The 2014-15 season, the Knicks would buy out his contract, allowing him to finish the season with the Dallas Mavericks. Following his short stint with the Mavericks, Stoudemire would play his final season with the Miami Heat. He missed a good chunk of the year due to knee soreness, and it was clear that his time in the league was coming to an end. However, he stepped up in a big way for the team, taking over as the starting center after Hassan Whiteside was injured. Then he would end up joining a professional league in Israel the following season. After retiring, Stoudemire would spend time as a Brooklyn Nets player development assistant coach. Rounding out the top 10 is another all-star caliber player who went on to have a great NBA career. Caron Butler entered the 2002 NBA draft coming off of an all-conference season at UConn. Scouts believe that he was nearly a complete package on the offensive end and an elite perimeter defender. However, there were some concerns about his shot selection and if he was going to be able to keep up with quicker guards and forwards at the NBA level. The Miami Heat would end up selecting him with the 10th overall pick, and he made an instant impact on the team, becoming the full-time starter in his rookie season. Butler had a great 2-year stint with Miami, however, it was just too enticing and a no-brainer for the Miami Heat to include him in a package that landed them Shaquille O'Neal. The deal sent Butler, Lamar Odom, Brian Grant, a first-round pick, and a second-round pick to the Lakers, all for Shaq. He would spend only one season with the Lakers where he served as the team's starting small forward. However, in the offseason, the Lakers would send him and Chucky Atkins to the Washington Wizards for Kwame Brown and Laron Profit. Butler would see a much bigger role with the Wizards, where he would go on to make back-to-back All-Star appearances. His best year came in the 2008-2009 season, where he averaged 20.8 points, 6.2 rebounds, 4.3 assists, and 1.6 steals per game, but somehow that year he didn't make the All-Star game. His time in Washington would come to an end in the 2009-2010 season when he was traded to the Dallas Mavericks along with Brendan Haywood and Deshaun Stevenson for Josh Howard, Drew Gooden, James Singleton, and Quentin Ross. While the Mavericks would go on to win the 2011 NBA title, Butler would not be able to participate in the series as he missed nearly half of the season after undergoing surgery to repair a torn tendon. Following the championship, Butler would sign a 3-year, $24 million deal with the Los Angeles Clippers. After 2 years with the Clippers, Butler would be a part of a deal that sent him and Eric Bledsoe to the Phoenix Suns in a 3-team trade. However, the Suns would quickly deal him to the Milwaukee Bucks. Later in the year, Butler would have his contract bought out and he signed with the Oklahoma City Thunder. In the 2014 offseason, Butler would sign a 2-year, $9 million deal with the Detroit Pistons. After just 1 year with that team, he was traded back to the Bucks alongside Sean Williams for Ersan Ilyasova. However, he was waived from the team. Butler then signed with the Sacramento Kings, where he would play in 17 games in what would be his final year of his 14-year career. Butler retired as a 2-time All-Star, 1-time NBA champion, and a member of the 2002-2003 All-Rookie team. Butler now serves as an assistant coach for the Miami Heat organization. The 2003 NBA draft class is one of the most stacked that we have ever seen. It might remind you of the 1996 draft class that featured players like Kobe Bryant, Allen Iverson, Ray Allen, Steve Nash, and the 1984 draft class that featured players such as Michael Jordan, Hakeem Olajuwon, Charles Barkley, and John Stockton. But this draft class in 2003 featured 9 All-Stars and at least 4 players that are likely to find their way into the Hall of Fame at some point. We're going to start it off today by talking about one of those players, one of the best even today as he closes in on the age of 39. Leading up to the NBA draft, LeBron James was already declared as the chosen one of the NBA, and scouts were head over heels with nearly every facet of his game. He had elite passing vision, especially for a wing player. Along with this, he was a physical specimen, allowing him to jump out of the gym and a dangerous shot blocker. There were some that thought he might crack under the immense amount of pressure that was placed on him coming right out of high school, and it was clear that his jump shot needed a little bit of work for him to have a truly complete game. Nonetheless, he was drafted to his hometown team, the Cleveland Cavaliers, with the first overall pick, and James was quick to silence all the doubters and averaged an elite 20.9 points, 5.5 rebounds, and 5.9 assists per game his rookie season, earning him the Rookie of the Year award. An important highlight of his first stint in Cleveland would come in the 2007 playoff run, in which he would put the entire franchise on his back. In Game 5 of the Eastern Conference Finals, he would set his then career high in playoff points with a 48-point outburst against one of the best defensive teams in the league at the time, the Detroit Pistons. Along with this, he would come up huge in the clutch, scoring Cleveland's final 25 points and 29 of their last 30 points. James left everyone in awe that night, including his opponents, and after the game, Chauncey Billups was quoted as saying, "We threw everything we had at him. We just couldn't stop him. It's frustrating. He put on an unbelievable display out there. It's probably the best I have seen against us ever in the playoffs." However, in the NBA Finals, they would run into a brutal San Antonio Spurs team. Cleveland lacked the depth that the Spurs possessed at the time, and because of this, San Antonio was able to throw constant double teams at LeBron, leading to the Cavs being swept in that series. Even with James having a rough series in that one, it was very clear that he was something special and just might live up to the expectations of being an all-time great. Following Game 4 of the series, Tim Duncan told him, "This is going to be your league in a little while, but I appreciate you giving us this year." This was extremely high praise for any player to receive, let alone one that was 22 years old at the time. James would be unable to lead the Cavs back to the finals in his first stint with the team, partially due to the front office being unable to put a competent roster around him. This would lead to one of the most controversial moves in NBA history that would put the player empowerment movement into motion. He held an hour-long announcement special that would be aired on ESPN that ended in an infamous quote, "In this fall, this is very tough. In this fall, I'm going to take my talents to South Beach and join the Miami Heat." He would go on to say, "Like I said before, I feel like it's going to give me the best opportunity to win and to win for multiple years. And not only just win in the regular season or just to win 5 games in a row or 3 games in a row. I want to be able to win championships." He would call his shot as the Heat would go on to win 2 titles in his next 4 years with the team. However, it would be a tough road to get there. In his first season with the Heat, it seemed like no team was going to stop him. However, in the finals, they would be stunned by the Dallas Mavericks and lose in 6 games. James had a complete collapse in this series, and it still stands as the largest stain on his legacy. When talking about this time, James was quoted as saying, "My first year in Miami, I was down there and I was literally like, I wanted to prove everybody wrong. And I literally lost myself in the moment. I lost myself. And I got all the way to the championship that year and lost. And the reason I know afterward, I was like, we lost because I wasn't even there." It was clear that there were still some essential improvements that James needed to make to his game, and he took the summer heading into the 2011-12 season to work closely with Hakeem Olajuwon to further round out his postgame. In those next NBA Finals, James and the Heat would go on to take down the Oklahoma City Thunder in only 5 games. While this was a very young and inexperienced team at the time, it still featured 3 future MVPs in Kevin Durant, Russell Westbrook, and James Harden. After finally winning his first championship, James was quoted as saying, "It means everything. I made a difficult decision to leave Cleveland, but I understood what my future was about. I understood that coming to Miami and being a part of this organization and being able to put together this team, I knew we had a bright future. This was a dream come true for me. I've been through a lot the last 2 years, but this is definitely the way that it pays off. Losing in the finals last year put me back in place. It humbled me a lot. I was able to go back to the basics. A lot of people had a lot to do with it. But at the end of the day, I just looked myself in the mirror and said, you need to be better, both on and off the floor. I'm happy I was able to put myself and our team in a position to win this." Following season, James was able to avenge his loss to Tim Duncan and the Spurs from 2007. Despite the team featuring a ton of talent in Tony Parker, Manu Ginobili, Tim Duncan, and Kawhi Leonard, James and the Heat were able to win in a very tough 7-game series. However, they would not be as lucky the following year. Despite Miami's best efforts, the Spurs were playing at an unbelievable level and were able to take the series in only 5 games. At this point, Wade and Bosh were beginning to regress due to some injuries here and there, and James got out while the getting was good and made his return to Cleveland. In the speech announcing his decision, he was quoted as saying, "I feel my calling here goes above basketball. I have a responsibility to lead in more ways than one, and I take that very seriously. My presence can make a difference in Miami, but I think it can mean more where I'm from. I want kids in Northeast Ohio, like the hundreds of Akron third graders I sponsor through my foundation, to realize that there's no better place to grow up. Maybe some of them will come home after college and start a family or open a business. That would make me smile. Our community, which has struggled so much, needs all the talent it can get. Northeast Ohio, nothing is given. Everything is earned. You work for what you have. I'm ready to accept the challenge. I'm coming home. LeBron and the Cavs would take on the Golden State Warriors in the NBA Finals for the entirety of his 4-year return to the team. And in 2015, he put on a masterful performance. However, with both Kyrie Irving and Kevin Love out with injuries, there was only so much that he could do, the entire team on his back. James would be able to extend the series to 6 games. However, it was clear that alone, he was not going to be able to take down Golden State. In the following season, it appeared that the Warriors would once again get the best of Cleveland, but James would lead them to a historic 3-1 comeback, the first time that this has ever occurred in NBA Finals history. Arguably, the most notable play of James's career would occur in Game 7 of this series when James sprinted full court and chased down an Andre Iguodala layup attempt. After the historic Game 7 win, James was quoted as saying, "I gave everything that I have. I put my heart and my blood and my sweat and my tears in this game against all odds. I don't know why we want to take the hardest road. I don't know why the man above gave me the hardest road, but there's nothing the man above going to put new situations that you can't handle." And I just kept the same positive attitude. Like, instead of saying, "Why me?" I was saying, this is what he wanted me to do. Cleveland, this is for you. Unfortunately, this would be the only finals win that James picked up in his second stint in Cleveland. In the following season, the Warriors added Kevin Durant to the roster, putting together arguably the most talented team ever assembled in NBA history. In the 2017 NBA Finals, James and the Cavs would fall in 5 games, and after that season, Kyrie Irving would request a trade and was sent to the Boston Celtics for Isaiah Thomas, Jay Crowder, Ante Zizic, a first-round pick, and a second-round pick. Along with this, the Cavs would sign Hall of Fame caliber veterans like Dwayne Wade and Derrick Rose. It was thought that this star power would be enough to match the Warriors' rotation. However, they would not mesh together well on the court at all, and most of the team was traded at the deadline. Cavs were swept in the 2018 Finals, and in the offseason, James would sign with the Los Angeles Lakers. Thus far during his time with the Lakers, James's stint has been riddled with injuries here and there, but that's expected as he continues to age. Despite this, when he's on the court, he remains as one of the top talent in the entire league, despite turning 39 years old this season. While the team added Anthony Davis to the roster, he has also struggled here and there through his time in LA with injuries of his own. In their first season together, though, the duo would take down the Miami Heat in the 2020 NBA Finals. However, this would be the only time that James and the Lakers have made it at the Western Conference in his 5 full seasons with the team. The most notable moment from James's time in Los Angeles so far came last season when he broke Kareem Abdul-Jabbar's record for the most career points in NBA history. Despite never being known as a pure scorer, I mean, LeBron loves to distribute the ball here and there, this record is truly a testament to the once-in-a-lifetime longevity that he's displayed. So far, he's won the 2003 to 2004 Rookie of the Year award, made 19 All-Star appearances, 19 All-NBA selections, 6 All-Defensive selections, 1 scoring title, 1 assist title, 4 MVP awards, 4 NBA titles, 4 Finals MVPs, and made an appearance on the NBA 75th anniversary team. Up to this point in time, LeBron is still with the Lakers, trying to lead them to yet another playoff appearance, and he is the only player on this list that we're talking about today that is still actively playing. Up next, we have a player who would go down as one of the biggest busts in NBA history in a lot of people's books, despite the longevity of his career. Coming into the draft, scouts were very high on Darko Milicic. He was thought of as a great inside scorer that could space the floor well and was an absolute nightmare for opposing players on the defensive end. There were some worries about his consistency for sure. While he showed a lot of potential, he showed it for just short stretches of time. Despite this, the championship caliber Detroit Pistons took him with the 2nd overall pick in this draft. Had they selected one of the next 3 players we're going to cover here, there's a strong chance that they could have had a dynasty throughout the early 2000s. Now, it became clear early on that Darko was not going to amount to much in the NBA. He struggled to find minutes on the Pistons and was traded midway through his 3rd season with the team. The deal sent Milicic and Carlos Arroyo to the Orlando Magic for Kelvin Cato and a first-round pick. After failing to receive a contract extension with the Magic, he signed a 3-year deal with the Memphis Grizzlies. He was miserable in Memphis, and this was arguably the lowest point of his entire career. He was traded midway through the final year of his contract, this time to the New York Knicks for Quentin Richardson and cash considerations. After playing in only 8 games, he strongly considered leaving the NBA and beginning a career overseas. However, he stuck it out with the NBA and made his way to the Minnesota Timberwolves, where he actually had the best stretch of his career. His second season with the team, he averaged a career high of 8.8 points per game, along with 5.2 rebounds and 2.0 blocks. After his 3-year stint with the Timberwolves was over, he would wrap up his career with the Boston Celtics, where he played in 1 game only. Nowadays, he has turned into a farmer and just enjoys tending to his crops. Quite the switch up from playing basketball. Selected 3rd overall, we have a future Hall of Famer and one of the best scorers of this generation. Carmelo Anthony entered the 2003 draft coming off of an NCAA title at Syracuse, where he would prove himself as one of, if not the most talented scorers in the entire class. Scouts viewed him as a 3-level scorer that could thrive in isolation, and along with this, his elite athleticism made him a threat to anybody trying to stop him at the rim. However, there were some concerns about his ability and effort on the defensive end of the ball. Despite this, the Denver Nuggets did not hesitate for a second to pick him with the 3rd overall selection. He would go on to have a great rookie season, and some would still argue to this day that he deserved the Rookie of the Year award over LeBron James. Melo averaged 21.0 points and 6.1 rebounds per game while leading the Nuggets to a playoff berth. While they would fall to the Minnesota Timberwolves in 5 games, it would still be a very impressive feat to have such a strong single-season turnaround. Anthony's best season with the Nuggets, regular season stats-wise, would come in the 2006 to 2007 season, where he would average 28.9 points, 6.0 rebounds, and 3.8 assists per game. In the postseason of the 2008 to 2009 season, Anthony would lead the Nuggets to the Western Conference Finals after taking down both the New Orleans Hornets and the Dallas Mavericks in 5 games. Despite running into a very talented Los Angeles Lakers team in the Western Conference Finals, they would still push the series to 6 games, but after another playoff defeat in the first round of the following season, Anthony was ready for a new environment in a bigger market. In the middle of the 2010 to 11 season, the Nuggets would trade him to the New York Knicks in a blockbuster 3-team deal. The deal was a bit complicated, but just to keep it simple, we're only going to cover who the Nuggets and the Knicks received. The Nuggets would send Anthony, Chauncey Billups, Sheldon Williams, Anthony Carter, Ronaldo Balkman, and a 1st-round draft pick to the Knicks, and in return they received Wilson Chandler, Raymond Felton, Danilo Gallinari, Timothy Mozgov, 2 second-round draft picks, 2 first-round draft picks, and cash. Melo would continue to light up the league and even led the league in scoring in the 2012-13 season with 28.7 points per game. However, it would not lead to much success in the postseason, winning only 1 series in his entire time with the Knicks. After 7 years with the team, Phil Jackson would finally decide to pull the plug on the experiment and trade one of the biggest stars in Knicks history. The deal sent Anthony to the Oklahoma City Thunder for Enes Kanter, Doug McDermott, and a 2nd-round draft pick. Many thought this would launch the Thunder into being real contenders in the Western Conference with 3 elite scorers with Anthony, Russell Westbrook, and Paul George. Anthony would remain with the Thunder for only 1 season though, and things really didn't work out as expected, resulting in another 1st-round exit in the postseason. In the offseason, Melo would be traded to the Atlanta Hawks in a 3-team deal. The trade ended up with Melo, Justin Anderson, and a 1st-round draft pick on the Hawks, and Timothy Luwawu-Cabarrot and Dennis Schroeder on the Thunder. He would then have his contract bought out by the Hawks and sign with the Houston Rockets to join Chris Paul and James Harden. But this would be a very short-lived stint in Houston. Around this time, Anthony was being labeled as a selfish ball hog that really destroyed any team's chances of being a true contender. After Melo failed to get signed through the remainder of the 2018-19 season, it appeared that he may be forced into an early retirement, but Damian Lillard would strongly encourage the Portland Trail Blazers front office to give him one more chance. This would end up being a career-reviving move for Melo, who thrived on the Trailblazers roster. While he would serve as the team's full-time starting power forward in the 2019-20 season, he would fully embrace a bench role in his final season with the team. The last season of his Hall of Fame caliber career would come as a member of the Los Angeles Lakers. Many thought this would be a great chance for him to end his career with a championship. However, the Lakers would greatly struggle with injuries, and the addition of Russell Westbrook to the roster didn't go to plan either, causing them to miss the playoffs. Despite this, Anthony still had a strong season off the bench for the team, but at the age of 37, he decided to call it a career. Over his 19 years in the league, Anthony was named to the All-Star game 10 times, the All-NBA team 6 times, won 1 scoring title, and made the NBA 75th anniversary team. While he would end his career without an appearance in the NBA Finals, and some still think that he was too focused on individual stats than team success, his talent as a scorer is just undeniable. When discussing the greatest scorer in NBA history, Gilbert Arenas was quoted as saying, "You would go Melo because he had 4-level, 5-level scoring. There's posting up, an ISO player. Melo posted up and he was an ISO player. When it comes down to who is the most complete scorer, I'm going to say Melo." And there is no doubt that Melo is going to be a Hall of Famer one day in the future. Up next, we have one of the most unselfish superstars in recent NBA history at the 4th pick. Chris Bosh entered the draft coming off of an all-conference season at Georgia Tech. Scouts were in love with his versatility. He was able to space the floor with respectable mid-range jumper and was a dominant interior defender. His athleticism and deep basketball IQ made him able to play either the power forward or the center position, but there were some doubts on if he was going to be able to continue to play center in the NBA with much stronger competition. Toronto Raptors picked him up with the 4th overall pick, and Bosh proved himself as more than capable of playing that center position at the NBA level, putting together a very respectable 11.5 points, 7.4 rebounds, and 1.4 blocks per game. He would continue to improve every season of his 7-year stint in Toronto, and he would serve as an incredible option besides Vince Carter through his first 2 years in the league. However, they would struggle to turn their great individual performances into overall team success. This mainly came because of the lack of depth on the roster, a trend that would continue throughout Bosh's entire tenure with the team. With Carter no longer on the roster, Bosh now ran the show and would make the All-Star game each following season that he played with the team. His best year with the Raptors would come in his final year with the team, where he averaged 24.0 points and 10.8 rebounds, both of which would go on to be career highs. In his 7 years with Toronto, he would lead the team to the postseason twice, but was bounced in the first round both times. As a result of the lack of help around him, Bosh would be the first piece put in motion in the 2010 offseason to assemble the big three of him, LeBron, and Dwayne Wade. It appeared that nobody was going to be able to stop this unit. However, like we talked about, the Dallas Mavericks would go on to stun them in their first trip to the NBA Finals. Where LeBron James collapsed in that series, the same could not be said about Chris Bosh. He averaged a very respectable 18.5 points and 7.3 rebounds per game and was tasked with guarding Dirk Nowitzki for most of the time. While Dirk was still the driving force in the Mavericks ultimately winning the series, Bosh was able to limit him slightly to a 26 point per game average compared to the 28.4 points per game average that he had in the 3 series leading up to the finals. In the offseason, Bosh was focused on doing whatever he could to help the team win. He had already accepted a role as the team's 3rd option on offense, something that had to be extremely difficult after being the face of the franchise in Toronto. When talking about his experience in taking on a reduced role, Bosh was quoted as saying, "Yeah, it's a lot more difficult taking a step back because you're used to doing something a certain way and getting looks a certain way. And then it's like, well, no, for the benefit of the team, you have to get it here. So even if you do like the left block, the volume of the left block is going to be different. Now you have to make those moves count. So with me, it was like a chess game. I'm doing this move and thinking about the next move and trying to stay 5 moves ahead. You're not getting it as much. If you got 1 or 2 a game, it's a lot different." Bosh would begin becoming more and more comfortable with his outside shot, leading to better court spacing with him at the center position. These sacrifices played a huge role in the Heat winning the next 2 championships over the Oklahoma City Thunder and the San Antonio Spurs. But after an incredible performance from the entire Spurs roster, the Heat would lose the final series of the Big Three era. After the departure of LeBron James in the 2014 offseason, the Heat would attempt to replace him with Luol Deng. And this led to Bosh getting to play a much bigger role in the offense, averaging 21.1 points per game in the first year of the Wade and Bosh-led offense. While the aging Bosh and Wade were not able to replicate the postseason success that they saw with LeBron on the roster, they were still a tough playoff matchup for any team to go against. Sadly, in the 2016-17 season, Bosh would have his career cut to an early end due to a blood clot being discovered in his left leg. This came just a year after he had been hospitalized with blood clots in his lungs. With the risk of Bosh potentially dying on the court to those clots, Heat were forced to cut him from the team despite Bosh not wanting to retire just yet. When talking about this time, he said, "You don't know how to take it. Life gets shortened into smaller bites. I was happy to be alive. I was happy just to have the smallest things. I felt right away that I was written off. I have the right to disagree with you. It wasn't a matter of if I'm going to play again, it's when." Unfortunately, Bosh would not be able to make a comeback from this and was forced to retire. However, he was still able to put together an incredible NBA career with 11 All-Star appearances, 1 All-NBA selection, 2 NBA titles, and was inducted into the Hall of Fame in 2021. Since retiring from the league, Bosh has learned to code, play the guitar, produced music, and wrote a book with advice for younger athletes. Up next, we have one of the greatest shooting guards that the game has ever seen, and Bosh's teammate on that big three. Dwayne Wade came to the draft coming off being named the Conference USA Player of the Year in his final year at Marquette. Scouts were extremely high on his athleticism, ability to finish around the basket, and shot blocking ability, especially for a guard. The only weak spot at the time seemed to be his outside shot. The Heat still selected him with the 5th overall pick, and he would go on to be the best player in franchise history. Wade would quickly establish himself as a franchise caliber player and almost instantly threw the Heat into a win-now situation, and as a result of this, in only his second year in the league, Pat Riley and the front office made the blockbuster move of trading for Shaquille O'Neal. In their first year together, they would lead the Heat to the Eastern Conference Finals, but they would be eliminated in a hard-fought 7-game series by the Detroit Pistons. However, in the following season, the two teams would meet up again in the Eastern Conference Finals. With another year of sharing the court together and Dwayne Wade developing, the Heat would win this series in 6 games and take down the Dallas Mavericks in 6 games in the NBA Finals. Wade would end up taking home the Finals MVP award, the first and only of his career. When talking about this time with Wade, Shaq was quoted as saying, "Dwayne Wade reminds me of a superhero movie. He does not know he has the power until he meets a powerful figure, and they tell him, 'Hey, you just like me.'" After this season, O'Neal would continue to regress with age, and Wade would continue to play a bigger role in the Heat's offense. However, he would not be able to lead them back to the finals with this core. His best season of the pre-LeBron era would come in the 2008-09 season, where he averaged 30.2 points, 5.0 rebounds, 7.5 assists, 2.2 steals, and 1.3 blocks per game, setting career highs in points, assists, steals, and blocks per game, along with leading the league in points this season. Now, it could be argued that Wade made the biggest sacrifice out of any player of the Big Three on the Miami Heat. He was the most beloved player in Heat history and was treated like royalty in the city. Acquiring players like James and Bosh, not only would he have his on-court opportunities cut, but he would also have to share the spotlight as well. When talking about the sacrifices that were needed when playing as a Big Three, he said, "We all knew the sacrifice that was going to be made. Obviously, you sit down and you talk about playing together. You think you know what's going to happen, you try to cover things in that moment, but then once you start playing together, you realize it's harder than what you thought. But we all knew we had to sacrifice. But at the end of the day, we sacrificed points, article hits, but what we gained was championships, friendships, and brotherhoods that last a lifetime. So I'm sure if we could do it all over again, we'd do it exactly the same way." Wade would be an elite second option through the 4 years of James being on the team and was an integral part of their 2 championships, even though knee injuries would cause him to see a bit of regression towards the tail end of their run. The season Bosh was being deemed medically unable to return to basketball, Wade would also leave Miami, signing with his hometown Chicago Bulls. This paired him with Rajon Rondo and Jimmy Butler. While this was an incredible team on paper, locker room issues would lead to them not seeing too much success. After 1 year in Chicago, he would join LeBron in Cleveland in an attempt to topple the Golden State Warriors. However, Wade would request to be traded back to Miami at the trade deadline once it became clear he was not the best fit in this offensive scheme. He spent the final 2 years of his career in Miami, earning an incredible send-off tour in the 2018-19 season. Wade called it a career after 16 years in the league, making 13 All-Star teams, 8 All-NBA teams, 3 All-Defensive teams, winning 3 NBA titles, 1 Finals MVP, made the NBA 75th anniversary team, and was inducted into the Hall of Fame in 2023. Since retiring, Wade has been trying to focus more on his mental health and is a minority owner in the Utah Jazz. The next player up at pick number 6, many forgot was a one-time All-Star. Chris Kaman entered the draft coming off being named the Conference Player of the Year and Defensive Player of the Year in his final season at Central Michigan. Scouts looked at him as a traditional big man for the time, a solid scorer around the basket, a good rebounder, and a rim protector. There were not too many doubts about his game, and teams felt as if they knew exactly what they're going to get with him. The Los Angeles Clippers picked him with the 6th overall pick, and he quickly found a spot for himself in the rotation. Kaman would serve as the team's starting center for the entirety of his 8-year run with the team. His best season would come where he averaged 18.5 points, 9.3 rebounds, and 1.2 blocks per game. This would earn him a spot on the All-Star team, the first and only of his career. But towards the tail end of his run with the Clippers, injuries would begin to take a toll on him, and he would jump in and out of the starting lineup. In the 2011-12 season, he was traded to the New Orleans Hornets in a deal that sent Kaman, Al-Farouq Aminu, Eric Gordon, and a first-round pick to the Hornets, and in return, they got Chris Paul and a second-round pick. Kaman would finish the year out with the Hornets before signing a one-year deal with the Dallas Mavericks. In the following offseason, he signed on for a single season with the Los Angeles Lakers. He then spent the final 2 years of his career as a member of the Portland Trail Blazers. While he only played in 16 games in the 2015-16 season, he would still be serviceable when he was called onto the floor and served as a great mentor for the team's younger players. After getting married, Kaman moved to rural Michigan and bought a farm where he currently lives with his wife and kids. Up next, we have a player who would go on to be a very serviceable guard, spending most of his career bouncing in and out of the starting lineup for each team that he played for. Kirk Hinrich entered the NBA draft coming off the third all-conference selection at Kansas. Scouts looked at him as a very NBA-ready player who had a high basketball IQ, an elite three-pointer, a pest as a perimeter defender, and was a great passer. There were, however, some concerns about whether he had the physique to be truly effective in the league, especially after spending 4 years in college. Chicago Bulls picked him up with the 7th overall pick. It did not take him long to break into the starting lineup and adjust extremely well to the league. His best season with the Bulls would come in the 2006 to 2007 season, where he averaged 16.6 points, 6.3 assists, and 1.3 steals per game, earning him a spot on the all-defensive team. After his 7th season in Chicago, Hinrich would be a part of a deal that sent him, Kevin Seraphin, and cash to the Washington Wizards for Vladimir Varaminko. At the deadline, Hinrich would be on the move again, being dealt to the Atlanta Hawks along with Hilton Armstrong for Mike Bibby, Jordan Crawford, Maurice Evans, and a first-round pick. After 2 years in Atlanta, Hinrich would make a return to Chicago, signing with the team in free agency. After another full 4 seasons with the Bulls, Hinrich would once again be traded to Atlanta in a 3-team deal. He played out the final 11 games of his career with the team before retiring in the 2015-16 season. Overall, Hinrich had a very solid career, averaging 10.9 points per game and 4.8 assists over the course of his 13 years in the league. After retiring from the NBA, Hinrich and his family moved to South Dakota, where he would serve as the lead academy specialist at Sanford Power Basketball Academy. The next player drafted showed a fair amount of potential, however, their career would be hampered by injuries. TJ Ford came into the draft after 2 consecutive all-conference seasons at Texas. Scouts saw him as a player that was incredibly shifty around the basket, a great facilitator, and a pesky perimeter defender. However, with him standing at only 6 foot and weighing around 165 pounds, they were not too sure if he could keep up with the physicality at the NBA level. Despite these concerns, the Milwaukee Bucks still selected him with the 8th overall pick. He started for the entirety of his rookie season and played a very traditional point guard role. Unfortunately, he struggled to score very efficiently, however, he was still a great passer and outside defender. His rookie season would be cut short due to a rough fall that would cause him to suffer a contusion of his spinal cord. This is an injury that has the potential to end a player's career and force Ford to miss the entire following year. Fortunately, he was able to return to action in the 2005 to 2006 season and reclaimed his role as the starting point guard. After a very strong campaign in his first year back from the injury, he was traded along with cash to the Toronto Raptors for Charlie Villanueva. Ford would continue to be a quality starting point guard in his first year in Toronto, however, he would see a diminished role in his second season with the team. After 2 years with the Raptors, Ford, Rasho Nesterovic, Maceo Baston, and Roy Hibbert would be traded to the Indiana Pacers for Jermaine O'Neal and Nathan Jawai. He would bounce in and out of the starting lineup early on in Indiana before struggling to see the floor in his final season with the team. Ford spent the final year of his career with the San Antonio Spurs after signing with the team in free agency. He played in 14 games in the 2011-12 season before retiring in the offseason. After retiring, Ford set his sights on the TJ Ford Basketball Academy, which is a youth basketball program for boys and girls in the Houston area. Up next, we have a player who would struggle to adjust their game to the NBA level. Mike Sweetney declared for the draft after 2 all-conference seasons in his final 2 years at Georgetown. Scouts were very high on his post game on both sides of the ball, however, they were a bit unsure how he would make it work as a 6'8 center at the NBA level. New York Knicks drafted him with the 9th overall pick, however, things got off to a concerning start to say the least. He struggled to see the floor in his rookie season, but he would jump in and out of the starting lineup the following season. This would be the strongest season of his career, where he averaged 8.4 points and 5.4 rebounds. In the offseason, he was traded to the Chicago Bulls along with Tim Thomas, Jermaine Jackson, 2 first-round picks, and 2 second-round picks for Eddie Curry, Antonio Davis, and a first-round pick. He would have similar numbers in his first year in Chicago, however, weight issues would begin to take a major toll on Sweetney's career. His final year in the league would come in the 2006 to 2007 season, where he played in 48 games but failed to crack the starting lineup in any of them. After retiring, Sweetney has become a mental health advocate and is the assistant coach of the Yeshiva University men's basketball team and is the head coach of a girls varsity basketball team. Rounding off the top 10 picks of this draft class is another player who struggled to find his place in the NBA and was out of the league relatively early on. Jarvis Hayes entered the draft coming off 2 all-conference seasons at Georgia. Scouts were very high on his scoring ability, and he was thought of as a very well-rounded player. However, there were some concerns that he was a bit too selfish on the offensive end. The Washington Wizards selected him with the 10th overall pick, and he got off to a solid start to his career, spending 4 years in Washington. His best year with the team would come in the 2004 to 2005 season, where he averaged 10.2 points and 4.2 rebounds, both of which were career highs. Third year in the league would be hampered by injuries, allowing him to only play in 21 games, and then in the following season, he would primarily come off the bench. In the 2007 offseason, he signed a 1-year deal with the Detroit Pistons. He served as a scoring spark off the bench once again and filled the role very well. Despite this, he would sign with the New Jersey Nets the following offseason to serve as the team's 6th man. He played a bench role in his final 2 years in the league, and after the 2009 to 2010 season, he would retire from basketball. Hayes now serves as an assistant coach to the Georgia State men's basketball team. The 2004 NBA draft class wasn't quite up to par with the previous years in 2003, but really, did it ever stand a chance? And also, that doesn't mean that there wasn't good players that came out of this class. It just so happens, pick number 1 turned out to be the best out of them all. At the time he was drafted, Dwight Howard was the 2nd consecutive number 1 pick to make the jump from high school straight to the NBA. And just like LeBron James, who was the top pick in the previous year's class, Howard would also go on to be a multiple-time All-Star, and most people believe he's going to be a Hall of Famer someday, including myself. Now, the Magic found themselves with the 1st overall pick here, and they were coming off a season where they went 21-61, finishing dead last in the Eastern Conference. Throughout that entire season, they had 5 different centers on the roster. Not a single one of them averaged more than 4 points per game. So it was pretty clear that the Magic needed some help in the paint, and they needed it badly. Also, Tracy McGrady was over here averaging 28 points per game, absolutely carrying this team for what? All for a last place finish in 2003. So coming into the draft, Dwight Howard seemed like a no-brainer pick for them. Not only did he seem like an amazing scorer, but he also had some good handles for a big man and could also spread the ball around. And forget about it on the defensive end. He was an amazing shot blocker, and there is a reason that he would go on to dress up as Superman in the dunk contest. His vertical was absolutely out of this world. Now, as a rookie, Howard immediately took over the starting center position for the Magic. He was able to quickly establish himself as one of the best big men in the league. In the 2008-2009 season, he had his best year during his time in Orlando, averaging 20.6 points, 13.8 rebounds, and 2.9 blocks per game, while shooting 57.2% from the field, leading the league in both rebounds and blocks per game in the regular season. He would also put the Magic on his back throughout the playoffs. In the first round, they took down the Sixers in 6 games. In the second round, they ran into a very tough Boston Celtics team, taking care of them in 7 games. And in the Eastern Conference Finals, they found themselves matched up against LeBron and the Cleveland Cavaliers, but Howard and the Magic were able to send them packing in 6 games. All of these previous matchups set them up to take on Kobe and Pau Gasol, who were clicking on all cylinders at the time. And despite Dwight averaging 15.4 points, 15.2 rebounds, and 4 blocks per game in the finals, the Magic ultimately came up short and were eliminated in 5 games. Things were going pretty smooth until his last season with Orlando started off with some controversy. With the season already shortened due to the lockout, Howard also demanded a trade to either the Nets, Lakers, or the Mavericks. While he did state that he wanted to stay in Orlando, he just wanted some star power around him to be able to compete with the rest of the teams in the league. This is kind of crazy to think about now because of all the super teams that we've seen since this time period. If Howard could have gone on to get another piece on that Magic team, who knows what would have happened. In the following offseason, he would not let off the gas, demanding a trade to the Nets and threatened even becoming a free agent if he didn't get traded. Well, he didn't end up getting onto the Nets, but he did find himself in LA, with the Lakers adding Howard along with Steve Nash to their already elite duo of Bryant and Gasol. Fans were hyped, thinking they could even take down the big three of LeBron, Wade, and Bosh that formed in the previous offseason in Miami. But despite how impressive they looked on paper, things did not go according to plan at all. Jalen Rose was with Bryant when the news of the deal broke, and he recounted the story saying, "Kobe just got off the phone as he was talking to Dwight Howard and said, 'This shit ain't gonna work.' That's exactly what he said. This is before he even laced up with Dwight one time. His head ain't right. He said, 'Mother effer, I'm here to help you get championships. You're asking me about producers?'" Even though Dwight and Kobe clearly had some beef, Dwight would still perform well through the 2012-13 season, averaging 17.1 points, 12.4 rebounds, which led the league, and 2.4 blocks per game. Everybody knows it takes two to tango as well, so Dwight had some words about Kobe, saying, "You play with Kobe Bryant, you know, he's going to get them up. But at the same time, I have to find ways to still be effective. I can't allow that to affect how I play." There were a lot of times early in the season where I would get upset, because I felt like he shot the ball a lot. And I wanted some touches down low. Do I want touches? Yeah. But whatever I have to do to help this team win, I have to keep my mind in that area. It's mental. Now, I'm sure those locker room issues had something to do with them getting swept in the first round by the San Antonio Spurs that year, despite having arguably the most talented roster in the league on paper. I also have to say that Spurs team is criminally underrated. They were disgusting in the early 2010s. Like I said, somehow they're still underrated to this day. Now, he would move on from the team in the following offseason, signing with the Houston Rockets, pairing him with another elite shooting guard at the time in James Harden. In his first season with the Rockets, Howard would make it to his final All-Star game. In the 2016 offseason, he declined a $23 million player option, and he wanted to play for the Hawks, where he would sign a 3-year, $70 million deal. At this point, Howard was falling off a bit as a scorer, and they were bounced in 6 games by the Wizards in the first round of the playoffs. This Hawks team wasn't terrible, but they didn't stand a chance of winning it all, if you ask me. After that season with the Hawks, Howard would continue to bounce around, first to the Hornets, then to the Wizards, before eventually finding himself on the Lakers, where he got a chance because DeMarcus Cousins suffered a season-ending injury. Howard played a huge role in the Lakers' championship run in the 2019-20 season. They beat the Heat in 6 games, giving Dwight the first NBA title of his career. Surprisingly, the Lakers didn't even bring him back after that year, and he would sign with the 76ers to back up Embiid. He actually ended up finishing his career back with the Lakers in the 2021-22 season because Anthony Davis would be the one suffering a season-ending injury. After leaving the NBA, Howard would go on to play in the T1 League in Taiwan, where he's one of their best players. He's very highly respected over there, and while a return to the NBA seems pretty unlikely at this point in time, a lot of people still think he can make some noise as a backup big man for a contending team. Now, if he doesn't end up returning to the NBA, Howard has quite a few accomplishments under his belt, with an appearance on the 2004-2005 All-Rookie team, 8 All-Star appearances, 8 All-NBA selections, 5 All-Defensive selections, led the league in rebounds for 5 seasons, led the league in blocks for 2 seasons, won 1 NBA title, and has 3 Defensive Player of the Year awards. Up next at pick number 2, we had the Charlotte Bobcats on the clock, and over the next couple of seasons, it really seemed like nothing was going right for that franchise. All right, let's back it up a little bit. Emeka Okafor was far from the worst pick in the world at number 2. Scouts were thinking, okay, this guy can score around the basket, rebound, and defend the rim. He can do everything that we need him to do at the power forward or center position, wherever we want to put him. But the question mark is, what can this guy do outside of the paint? Because that's what's going to really decide if he's going to be truly a special player or not. Well, he got off to a hot start, taking over as the team's starting center to open up the season and averaging 15.1 points, 10.9 rebounds, and 1.7 blocks per game. He even won the Rookie of the Year award. So the Bobcats are over here thinking, damn, we really got a steal with this one. Unfortunately, he would begin to trend in the wrong direction throughout the rest of his career. After his 3rd year with the team, the front office wanted to make him the face of the franchise and re-signed him to a 6-year, $72 million deal, which seemed all fine and dandy at the time. But in the 2009 offseason, there were some serious concerns if Okafor was even right for the team, and the Bobcats chose to move on from him. He was traded to the Hornets, where he would actually make the playoffs for the first time in his career in the 2010-11 season. However, they were bounced in the first round by the Lakers in 6 games. In the 2012 offseason, Okafor was traded to the Wizards, but tragedy would strike soon after, and he would miss the following 4 seasons due to a herniated disc in his neck. During this stretch of his career, he was traded to the Phoenix Suns for Marcin Gortat. While being out of the league for this much time would almost be a guaranteed death sentence for any player's career, Okafor was able to make a return to the game in the 2017-18 season. He returned to New Orleans on a 10-day contract on February 3rd, 2018. He actually impressed the coaching staff enough on this 10-day deal to be brought onto the team for the remainder of the season, and despite being signed by the Philadelphia 76ers in the following offseason, he would be waived before the season began, ending his career with an appearance on the 2004-2005 All-Rookie team and winning the 2004-2005 Rookie of the Year award. Despite all the obstacles that he faced, you still have to be really proud of this guy. Give him a ton of credit for pushing through that injury and having a solid overall career. From what I could find, Okafor loves cars and he has a wide variety of different collectibles. He's also always going to be known in everybody's mind as a UConn legend. Up at number 3, we had the Chicago Bulls, who were absolutely itching to improve from their 23-59 horrendous season that had just ended. Around this time, the Bulls were really lacking that star talent, in my opinion. The year prior, they were working with Jamal Crawford and Eddie Curry as their best players, and while by no means am I calling those guys scrubs or bad players or anything like that, I really think that they were missing out on having that clear-cut elite number 1 option on their roster. So the year prior, the Bulls had just 2 shooting guards on the roster. We had Kendall Gill, who was a fantastic player in his prime, but he was now 35 years old and on his way out the door, and Roger Mason, who just played in 3 games with the Bulls before ending up in Toronto that year. Ben Gordon entered the draft with an elite outside shot, great athletic ability, and he could finish around the hoop. I mean, this guy seemed like he checked all the boxes, and the Bulls selected him with the 3rd overall pick, and he would thrive as a 6th man on this team. In his rookie season, he averaged 15.1 points while shooting an elite 40.5% from 3, leading to a 6th Man of the Year award and a spot on the All-Rookie team. The best season of his career would come in his 3rd year with the Bulls, where he averaged 21.4 points while shooting 41.3% from 3. But even with Gordon going absolutely wild from beyond the arc, it was still somehow not enough for them to make much noise in the postseason. Following the 2008-2009 season, Gordon finally got paid on a 5-year, $55 million deal with the Detroit Pistons. This is where he would bounce in and out of the starting lineup during his 3 seasons with the team, and he would unfortunately start to see his usage drop. In the 2012 offseason, Gordon found himself on the Bobcats, where he would play a purely bench role. Then he would find himself on the Magic after being waived by Charlotte, signing a 2-year, $9 million deal, where he would play in 56 games that season, still shooting a very strong 36.1% from 3, but the Magic would waive him from the team that following offseason. He then would sign with the Warriors, but was waived after playing in just 2 preseason games. Gordon ended his career with an appearance on the 2004-2005 All-Rookie team and won 6th Man of the Year award. Unfortunately, after his basketball career ended, Gordon would get into a bit of trouble. In 2022, he allegedly punched his son and a security guard in separate instances, and in April of 2023, on his 40th birthday, he was arrested on weapons charges at a Connecticut juice bar. Not really the type of birthday I'm sure he had in mind. Hopefully, for his sake, he gets that all situated out. On the clock at number 4, the Clippers were desperate for a spark following a last place finish in the Western Conference the year prior. Shaun Livingston is another player from this class that would make the tough jump from high school straight to the NBA. But the Clippers really needed a point guard because the year prior they had, let's just call it, a bunch of mediocre point guards at best. Livingston was also coming off a season in which he was named Mr. Basketball of Illinois. The Clippers loved his size for a point guard and took him at number 4, but he struggled to find playing time as a starter, especially in his 2nd season, because the team already featured Sam Cassell at the position. Despite getting off to a slow start in his career, he was just starting to turn things around when tragedy would strike and put Livingston's career at risk. After landing awkwardly after a layup, Livingston would suffer one of the nastiest injuries in NBA history. He dislocated his left kneecap, femur, and tibia, and tore his ACL, PCL, and MCL. This injury was so bad that after he was rushed to the hospital, medical staff seriously considered amputating his leg. He would miss the entirety of the 2007-2008 season, and it would understandably take him some time to return to being able to play on a regular basis. After making the comeback, Livingston would bounce around a ton of different teams. First with the Heat, then the Thunder, Wizards, Bobcats, where he would actually play in a career-high 73 games and was finally feeling fully back from that leg injury. Then on to the Bucks, Wizards again, Cavaliers, Nets, and then finally the Golden State Warriors, where he would have the best stretch of his entire career. He was a crucial player coming off the bench and would receive a good amount of playing time in their 5 consecutive trips to the finals. Livingston played a major role in all 3 of the Warriors' titles during this run and would retire following their 5th trip to the finals in the 2018-19 season. Despite suffering one of the worst injuries in NBA history, he was still able to bounce back and have a very successful 14-year career, retiring as a 3-time NBA champion. After retiring, Livingston was named the Warriors' team director of players' affairs and engagement, but has since moved on from that position to focus on his family and plans to move to Las Vegas full-time. Up next at number 5, we have a very skilled point guard who is probably most known for playing on the Mavericks, but I specifically remember watching a ton of this guy on the New Jersey Nets in the late 2000s. Even though Devin Harris had an amazing scoring ability and was a great defender, the Wizards still had no problem trading him to the Dallas Mavericks. This deal sent Harris, Jerry Stackhouse, and Christian Laettner to the Mavericks, and in return the Wizards received Antoine Jamison and cash. After losing Steve Nash to the Suns, the Mavericks were in need of someone to step up for them at the position, but it wouldn't be Devin Harris right away. He actually struggled to break into the starting lineup throughout his first 2 years in the league due to the team already having Jason Terry at the point guard position. But in the 2006-2007 season, the coaching staff realized Jason Terry actually might be a better fit at the shooting guard position, which then opened up a starting spot for Devin Harris. That didn't last too long though, as he was sent to the Nets in the middle of the following season. Once he was in New Jersey, he remained a starter and had his best stats in the 2008-2009 season. In that year, he averaged 21.3 points, 6.9 assists, and 1.7 steals per game. This would earn him his first and only All-Star appearance. Now, about a season and a half later, Harris found himself on the move once again, this time to the Utah Jazz and then the Atlanta Hawks. In the 2013 offseason, Harris would make his return back to the Dallas Mavericks, where he would spend the following 4.5 seasons. With the Mavericks, Harris would embrace much more of a bench role this time around, serving as a talented backup veteran point guard. Eventually, he would be sent to the Nuggets in a 3-team deal that landed him in Denver, and after finishing out the season with the Nuggets, he returned back once again to the Dallas Mavericks to play in his final NBA season. Overall, he put together a very impressive NBA career, retiring as a 1-time All-Star. Unfortunately, he couldn't be a part of that Mavericks team that beat up the Big 3 Heat team in 2011 and won the championship. I would have loved to see Devin Harris get one. Now, he's actually focused on enjoying fatherhood and worked with a few Mavs youth summer camps over the past few years. Up next at number 6, we had the Atlanta Hawks looking to get things back on track after a brutal 28-win season. Unfortunately, they would go in the wrong direction, and that wouldn't be the case. They would get even worse and only win 13 entire games. Yikes, to say the least. With Jason Terry leaving Atlanta to join the Mavericks in the 2004 season and Steven Jackson going to Indiana, the Hawks certainly needed to fill the void that they were going to leave behind. But you'll never believe this. The Hawks' top 5 scorers from the 2003 season would all either leave, joining new teams, or end up retiring. Josh Childress seemed like the perfect candidate for this struggling Hawks team in desperate need of an offensive spark, and he was thought of as a very talented all-around player. Their only concern with this game was how much he would turn the ball over. Now, he was still picked at number 6 and broke into the starting lineup in February of his rookie season, averaging 10.1 points and 6 rebounds, which earned him a spot on the 2004-2005 All-Rookie team. His best season with the team would come in his 3rd year in the league, where he averaged 13 points, 6.2 rebounds, and 1.1 steals per game. But after playing out his rookie contract, Childress would leave the NBA, turning down an extension offer from the Atlanta Hawks. He received a 3-year, $20 million deal in Greece, which was actually the equivalent of a $32.5 million NBA contract because of the looser tax laws in that country, and he could also opt out after each year if he really wanted to. kind of a no-brainer decision there for Childress. After playing for 2 years overseas, Childress made his return to the NBA, signing a 5-year deal with the Phoenix Suns. He mainly came off the bench for the Suns, and after just 2 seasons, he would end up being released. Childress would then bounce from the Nets to the Wizards and then eventually to the New Orleans Pelicans, where he would finish out his NBA career after playing in just 4 games. After this season, he would return to playing overseas in Australia and Japan. Childress is now the CEO of a real estate development company called Landspire Group and also an investor. Up 7th were the Phoenix Suns, who traded away what would go on to be an elite defender later on in his career. I wouldn't say the Suns struggled too much though, as they ended up finishing with a record of 62-20 that season, but Luol Deng still would have been a nice pickup for them. Regardless, the Bulls had no problem trading for Deng since they finished with a record of just 23-59 in the previous season. They desperately needed help not only on defense, but also on the offensive side of the ball, which they would get from Ben Gordon, who we talked about earlier, and of course, Luol Deng. The Bulls saw a ton of potential in Deng, and they were very high on his versatility, mid-range jump shot, playmaking ability, scoring ability around the hoop, and of course, his elite perimeter defense. Deng would jump in and out of the starting lineup in his first 2 seasons before finally taking over as a full-time starter in the 2006-2007 season. Early on, he proved himself not only to be talented, but that he had a ton of promise for the future. He averaged 11.7 points and 5.3 rebounds per game in his rookie season, earning him a spot on the all-rookie team. Deng was a perfect player to fit in Tom Thibodeau's scheme when he took over as the head coach. In that 2010-11 season, Deng would be a crucial part of the Bulls' postseason run to the Eastern Conference Finals. They took down the Pacers in 5 games, Hawks in 6 games, but they would run into the Big 3 Miami Heat team in the Eastern Conference Finals. Of course, they did not make things easy for the Heat. However, they certainly lacked the star power to keep up with James, Wade, and Bosh, and they would end up losing in 5 games. Fresh off that loss to Miami, something must have sparked in Luol Deng, because he went on a hot stretch for the next 2 years. He made the All-Star game both years, as well as being selected for the All-Defensive team in the 2011-2012 season. After spending nearly a decade with the Bulls, Deng would sign with the Miami Heat in an attempt to replace LeBron James, who made his return to Cleveland. While Deng played his part, it was almost impossible for him to fill that void in the roster that James left. I mean, you're talking about a top 5 player all time here being replaced by Luol Deng. It's just not going to happen. Replaced by almost anybody, it's not going to happen. After 2 years with the Heat, he signed a 4-year, $72 million deal with the Lakers, where he played a much more reduced role. He then went on to sign with the Timberwolves, where he would spend his final season of his career. He came off the bench in almost every game that he played in that season, but he was still a solid bench piece. Despite this, he would decide to retire at the end of the season with an appearance on the All-Rookie team, 2 All-Star appearances, and 1 appearance on the All-Defensive team under his belt. As of 2023, Deng served as an assistant coach for the South Sudan men's national team and as president of the South Sudan Basketball Federation. Up on the clock at pick number 8, we had the Toronto Raptors, and you better believe they wish they had this pick back, because it did not pan out nearly the way they hoped. So the Raptors were coming off a year where they won 33 games and lost 49, and it just so happens that that would be their exact record this year as well. They got better on offense, but got much worse on defense, giving up an average of over 100 points per game, which was bottom 5 in the league at that time. They saw an opportunity in Rafael Araujo because of his offensive abilities, rebounding skills, and the passion that he had for the game, but he was just not good at blocking shots. And I know they had Chris Bosh at this time, that he was extremely young, but looking back on things, I think they should have just stuck with him at center for this season at least. Despite knowing the struggles that he had blocking shots, the Raptors still selected him with the 8th overall pick. He struggled badly throughout his 2 seasons with the team, at times barely even seeing the floor because he was playing so badly. During his time in Toronto, he averaged 2.9 points and 3 rebounds per game while shooting 40.3% from the field. In the 2006 offseason, Araujo was traded to the Utah Jazz. Sadly, a change of scenery would not make much of a difference for him at all, and he would only see the court in 28 games, maintaining the averages basically that he had in Toronto. Despite the team's owner expressing hope that he would return to the team after his rookie contract expired, that did not happen, and he was out of the league after only 3 seasons. Up at pick number 9, we had the 76ers, who ended up selecting the longest lasting player that came from this draft class. Just like the Raptors in the previous year, the 76ers would also win 33 games. They were in desperate need of another scoring option because Allen Iverson was absolutely carrying this team with 26.4 points per game the previous year. Even with AI putting the team on his back, they still finished second to last in the league in points per game. They ended up selecting Andre Iguodala with the 9th overall pick, but he wouldn't really turn up the scoring for a couple of years. Instead, the 76ers went out and got Chris Webber from Sacramento, and Iguodala still contributed in many aspects of the game though, averaging 9 points, 5.7 rebounds, 3 assists, and 1.7 steals per game, earning him a spot on the all-rookie team. But with all those scoring options on the team finally stepping up and holding their own, Iggy thrived on defense, which was huge for the 76ers. In his 3rd year in the league, he took over as the team's leader after Allen Iverson was traded to the Nuggets. In that year, he averaged 18.2 points, 5.7 rebounds, 5.7 assists, and 2 steals per game. In his final year with the 76ers, he would make his first and only All-Star appearance of his career. After spending 1 year with the Nuggets, he would decline a 5-year extension from Denver and take a 4-year, $48 million deal with the Golden State Warriors. And while in Golden State, he took a crucial leadership and mentor role for the team and was credited with aiding in the development of Stephen Curry, Klay Thompson, and Draymond Green that would go on to be the core of Golden State's dynasty. Head coach Steve Kerr was quoted as saying, "He's one of the main reasons that we've got those 4 banners hanging up. He was a foundational piece of what has been one of the great runs in NBA history." In many ways, Andre set the tone for the whole thing by agreeing to come off the bench in 2014 to 15, really sacrificing and making the move that unlocked that team. Iggy would go on to win the Finals MVP in the first of the 4 championships he would win in Golden State, which was mainly for all the defensive pressure that he put on LeBron throughout that series. After 6 years, 3 titles, and 5 trips to the finals, Iguodala was traded to the Grizzlies, but wasn't a fan of playing for a rebuilding franchise. He wanted to win now while his career was winding down and be a part of a contending team, which is why he ended up on the Heat. The Heat would make the finals in his first year with the team, however, they would come up a bit short to the Los Angeles Lakers, losing the series in 6 games. After 1 more season in Miami, Iguodala would make a return to Golden State, where he would mainly play a bench role. Also, he served mainly as a mentor and a locker room guy, however, he was still a very talented defender. Golden State would win the 4th NBA Finals of their dynasty run, this time taking down the Boston Celtics in 6 games. He would only play in 8 games throughout the 2022-23 season before calling it a career at 39 years old, retiring with 1 All-Star appearance, 4 NBA championships, an appearance on the All-Rookie team, 2 appearances on the All-Defensive team, and won the Finals MVP award once. At pick number 10, the Cavaliers took a player that they would certainly regret after the first few seasons. The Cavs were coming off a draft in which they struck gold, if you can say that, with the number 1 pick in LeBron James, and now they were looking to do that in back-to-back years. They decided to go with Luke Jackson, who actually played the small forward position, which is interesting because LeBron was mostly known for playing small forward on the Cavaliers. They were thinking that Jackson could be a great fit for the team with his elite outside shot and great passing ability, but injuries would soon take a toll on his career, leading to Jackson playing in only 46 games in his first 2 seasons in Cleveland. He never actually started in a single game for Cleveland, and after the 2005-2006 season, he was traded to the Boston Celtics, but was waived before the season began. While recovering from an injury, Jackson spent time in the D-League before signing a 10-day contract with the Los Angeles Clippers. Unfortunately, they did not sign him to another contract, but he still found another opportunity that season with the Toronto Raptors on another 10-day deal. Once that 10-day deal was up, he got another 10-day contract from those same Raptors, and ultimately, he would turn it into a 2-year deal. He was waived by the Raptors before the 2007-2008 season kicked off, and after spending some more time in the D-League, he would sign with the Miami Heat. This was the final season of his career, and he played in 14 games for Miami, averaging a career-high 5.6 points while shooting 36.7% from 3. After leaving the NBA, Jackson would play some overseas basketball, spend some time coaching the Bushnell men's basketball team, and now appears to work for Emerald Medical Management. Now, if you guys enjoyed this video, all I ask of you, just drop a thumbs up, check out the other content on the channel, and I will catch you in the 2005 Top 10 Draft Picks video. Have a great day.